Chapter 1. Li Rongrong 5.5 weeks pregnant. The fetal heart is normal. Su Qingsang looked up at the woman in front of her and said calmly, "But I suggest you do a blood test to check other indicators." Doctor. The woman on the bed looked delicate and weak. She blinked her big eyes at Su Qingsang, looking worried and scared. "Do you need to draw blood for the blood test? It's very painful to draw blood." She raised her voice when she said the word "it hurts." Su Qingsang frowned and looked at the woman in front of her. "Just a little blood. Check. Can I wait for my husband to come?" Li Rongrong bit her lip and looked pitiful. Su Qingsang's eyebrows twitched. It was the first time she saw a woman who had to wait for her husband to come to take blood. She nodded and walked to the bed next to her. On the other side was a pregnant woman with obvious signs of threatened abortion. She was staying in the hospital to keep the baby safe. Su Qingsang finished the checkup and told her some things to pay attention to. Before she finished, footsteps came from outside the ward. A figure rushed in. "Rongrong, are you okay? How are you?" Su Qingsang's back was facing the door. Hearing the familiar voice, she couldn't help but turn her head. The woman called Li Rongrong looked like she saw her savior. She grabbed the man's arm. "Lennon, I'm pregnant. I just checked. Are you happy?" "You're pregnant?" Wei Lennon looked at the person in front of him with wide eyes. There was no surprise on his face but more shock. "Yes." Li Rongrong nodded heavily. Her face was full of joy. He looked in Su Qingsang's direction and said, "Well, that doctor just checked me and confirmed it." Her coquettish tone made Su Qingsang feel disgusted. His lips curled into a faint smile as he looked at Wei Lennon with a hint of mockery. The moment Wei Lennon saw Su Qingsang, his face turned a little pale. He subconsciously wanted to pull Li Rongrong's hand away. Li Rongrong was like an octopus, holding his hand tightly and not letting go. "Lennon, you haven't said anything. Are you not happy that I'm pregnant?" "Gao, I'm happy." Wei Lennon's face was extremely stiff. He tried to pull Li Rongrong's hand away again. Li Rongrong turned to look at Su Qingsang and said in a coquettish voice, "Doctor, my husband is here. Didn't you say you wanted to draw blood? I'm ready now." As she spoke, she turned to look at Wei Lennon. "Lennon, I'm so scared when you're not here. Now that you're here, I'm not afraid." Wei Lennon looked at Su Qingsang. Once again, she grabbed Li Rongrong's hand and looked at Su Qingsang with a pleading look. "Qing." The smile on Su Qingsang's face disappeared. She turned to the pregnant woman lying on the hospital bed and told her what to do. Then she walked back and stood in front of Li Rongrong's bed. "If you want to draw blood, I've already prepared the list. You can ask your husband to take the list to the cashier at the front desk to pay first, and then go to the blood test room on the 3rd floor to draw blood." Only Wei Lennon noticed that when Su Qingsang said the word husband, her tone seemed to be a few decibels higher, and the expression on her face had a bit of mockery. It became more and more awkward. "Okay. Thank you, doctor." Li Rongrong smiled sweetly. Su Qingsang was not in the mood to appreciate it. She turned and walked out of the ward. Before she left, she glanced at Wei Lennon coldly. Wei Lennon's lips moved. He wanted to say something but stopped when he saw Li Rongrong's happy and shy expression. After saying that he was going to pay, he quickly turned and followed behind Su Qingsang. Once they were out of the ward, he couldn't wait to grab Su Qingsang's hand. "Qingsang, I can explain. Listen to me, Su Qingsang took a step back and avoided his hand. Her gaze fell on Wei Lennon's anxious face. Her face was no longer calm, only sarcasm. Chapter 2. Qingsang. Wei Lennon was very anxious and tried to pull Su Qingsang's hand again. Su Qingsang dodged. This time her gaze was colder. She looked very gentle, with willowy eyebrows and an oval face. Her eyes were curved and her nose was straight. She was cute. Her lips were red and her teeth were white. Her skin was white and rosy. She looked like a typical Jiangnan girl. But her face was no longer gentle. Her sharp gaze made Wei Lennon retract his hand. "I was drunk that day. I didn't do it on purpose. Qingsang, listen to me. She even called you husband? But you told me you were drunk?" "I was really drunk. I didn't think that it would be like that just once." Wei Lennon raised his hand subconsciously as if he wanted to explain. Su Qingsang didn't have the patience to listen anymore. "It's okay. You didn't think you were drunk, but you are sober now, right?" Su Qingsang had a serious expression on her face. Her white coat made Wei Lennon's aura even more subdued. "Qingsang, I wish you and Miss Li Rongrong a lifetime of happiness. As for our wedding tomorrow, let's cancel it." As she spoke, she noticed that there were already people looking at her from the corridor. Su Qingsang's mood wasn't good again. Without thinking, he went to his office and chose the side with fewer people. Wei Lenin was stunned for a moment and quickly chased after her. Qingsang, are you joking? We are all prepared. Now you want to cancel it? Both families and friends had been notified. The venue for the wedding and the banquet had been booked. Now you want to cancel it? Su Qingsang didn't want to argue anymore, but Wei Lenin blocked in front of Su Qingsang again. Qingsang, you have to think it through. You really want to cancel the wedding? Aren't you afraid of your parents blaming you? Su Qingsang's expression changed slightly. Everything else was fine, but her parents. She thought about her original intention of getting married. To be honest, she really wanted to get rid of that family. But she didn't want a man like Wei Lenin even if she was beaten to death. She felt disgusted. Qingsang, forgive me this time. I swear. I won't do it again. I promise. I can ask her to abort the child. Listen to me. Wei Lenin seemed to have noticed her hesitation, so he hurriedly tried to explain. However, Su Qingsang didn't have the patience to listen. Even if she couldn't leave that family for the time being, she didn't want to be with a man like Wei Lenin. At that time, Wei Lenin was gentle and refined, looking like an honest person. But who would have thought that such an honest man would actually do such a thing? Get out of my way. Wei Lenin did not give up. He grabbed Su Qingsang's hand again. Qingsang, I swear I really... Su Qingsang was annoyed and reached out her hand to push Wei Lenin without hesitation. She didn't expect that in order to grab her hand, Wei Lenin would stretch out his other hand to pull her. Su Qingsang tried to dodge, but her whole body fell to the side. She thought she was going to fall, but she ended up bumping into someone. Su Qingsang didn't have time to steady herself, so she instinctively grabbed the nearest object to her and stood up straight. But when she managed to stand firm, she realized that she was grabbing onto someone else's arms? Su Qingsang seemed to have just realized that the person she bumped into was a man, and a very tall man. She felt a little awkward and quickly let go of her hand. I'm sorry. Before she could finish her apology, Wei Lenin, who was on the other side, took the opportunity to grab her hand. Qingsang, listen to me. That child was really an accident. I will definitely solve it. Forgive me, and I promise there won't be a next time. Let go. Su Qingsang's momentary awkwardness turned into disgust. Li Rongrong called him so intimately and even called him her husband. Who would believe that it was an accident? Qingsang, do you really want tomorrow's wedding to be without a groom? Think about your parents. Do you think, Wei Lenin? Su Qingsang wasn't just disgusted. She was really angry. Are you threatening me? Qingsang, I'm not threatening you. I just hope that you can forgive me this time. After all, tomorrow's wedding cannot be without a groom, right? Su Qingsang's chest rose and fell violently. Looking at Wei Lenin's seemingly pleading but actually threatening expression, she angrily pulled her hand back. Her movement was too big and she accidentally hit the man whose tie she had just grabbed. Su Qingsang suddenly realized that the man hadn't left yet. She turned around and looked at the man in front of her. She hadn't noticed him before, but now that she looked at him, he was really not bad. Not only was he not bad, he looked very young, probably less than 30 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes, a sharp nose and a chiseled face. He was wearing a casual t-shirt and jeans, and he was tall and straight. His eyes were clear and bright. He looked like a gentleman. His eyes were looking at the scene in front of him with a hint of interest. It was as if he was watching a show. Su Qingsang's brain heated up. She suddenly took a step forward and stood in front of the man. Sir, are you married? The man raised his eyebrows as if he was a little surprised by Su Qingsang's question, but he answered very directly, no. Do you have a girlfriend? No. The interest on the man's face became more and more obvious. There seemed to be a faint smile in his eyes. Chapter 3. Su Qingsang spoke a little fast at the beginning, but she expressed herself very clearly. The last sentence, "May I ask if you are willing to marry me?" rang out at the corner of the corridor. Wei Lenin rushed up the moment he heard it. He grabbed Su Qingsang's hand and tried to pull her behind him. Qingsang, are you crazy? Wei Lenin stared at Su Qingsang in disbelief. He couldn't believe that she would do such a thing. Do you know who he is? How can you just casually say that you want to marry him? Su Qingsang, you. Let go of me. Su Qingsang wasn't in the mood to argue with this man who cheated on her even before marriage. It has nothing to do with you. She tried to pull her hand back, but Wei Lenin was so angry that he used a lot of strength. Su Qingsang's wrist was red from his grip. She couldn't break free. The man who was proposed to by Su Qingsang gently reached out his hand. With a little force, the man's slender and well-defined palm pinched Wei Lenin's wrist. Wei Lenin felt the pain and had to let go. Su Qingsang looked at the red mark on her wrist and glared at Wei Lenin. Qingsang, I am He Jinyao. The man took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qingsang. I am 30 years old. I am unmarried. I am willing to marry you. Su Qingsang looked at the man's face. He was calm, as if talking about marriage was as normal as talking about the weather. She was a doctor and had taken an elective course in psychology when she was in college. She couldn't see through He Jinyao's expression at all. She didn't know if he was joking or serious. However, the other party's words made her feel as if she was riding a tiger and unable to back down. Qingsang, you can't agree. I've told you. Wei Lenin's arrogant voice was still behind her. Su Qingsang didn't want to listen. She reached out her hand to He Jinyao and said, "Thank you for being willing to marry me. Tomorrow afternoon at 5:30. Lin City Four Seasons Hotel. Please be punctual." Her voice was slightly hesitant and conflicted. This decision was undoubtedly the boldest decision she had ever made in her life. 5:30 tomorrow afternoon, Four Seasons Hotel. Okay, I got it. He Jinyao reached out his hand and shook Su Qingsang's. Don't worry, I'll be there on time. He repeated what she said, which made Su Qingsang feel much better. When one person repeats another person's words, it strengthens the memory. She also felt that she was too crazy to be normal. Before she could calm down, her phone rang. Dr. Su, the pregnant woman with PIH who came in yesterday, is about to give birth. Chief Zhang and Chief Chen had already arrived at the operating theater. Where are you now? I'll be right there. Hearing the voice on the other end of the phone, Su Qingsang's face immediately became serious. She hung up the phone and nodded slightly at He Jinyao. Sorry, I have another operation. It doesn't matter. The corners of He Jinyao's lips curled up slightly. Go ahead. I'll show up on time tomorrow. Thank you. Whether He Jinyao would show up tomorrow or not, he had helped her out now. She was grateful to him. Su Qingsang didn't stay for long. She quickly ran towards the operating room. She ran so fast that she disappeared at the other end of the corridor in the blink of an eye. Wei Lenin looked at how easily Su Qingsang had decided his life's most important event. He couldn't believe that she would change her boyfriend so easily. He turned around and saw that the man was still standing there, so he quickly stood in front of He Jinyao. Don't be too happy. She was just saying it casually. She won't marry you tomorrow. He Jinyao originally wanted to leave, but he stopped and glanced at Wei Lenin's face. I can't guarantee whether she will marry me or not. But one thing I'm sure of is that she will never marry you. You? Wei Lenin's face darkened, but He Jinyao acted as if he didn't see him. He directly walked past him and left. Wei Lenin was left standing there full of hatred. He wanted to argue with Su Qingsang again, but his phone rang at that moment. Chapter 4. Su Qingsang's surgery yesterday took a long time. By the time the surgery was over, it was already midnight. After a tiring day, Su Qingsang fell asleep as soon as she got home. She had already applied for leave. He didn't have to go to work today, so it didn't matter if he slept a little later. But when she woke up from the exhaustion of the day before and saw the date note on the calendar, she finally remembered that today was her wedding day. Su Qingsang shook her head and went to the bathroom to wash up. Looking at himself in the mirror, he felt a headache coming on. Yesterday she proposed to another man on impulse. But she knew that the man wouldn't take it seriously, and neither would she. Since that was the case, where could she find a groom to complete the wedding today? Did he really want her to forgive Wei Lenin and marry him? No. He didn't want it even if he was beaten to death. But would the wedding be ruined just like that? Thinking of certain things, her expression turned ugly for a moment. Su Qingsang's mood lasted until she received a call from her good friend, who was also her bridesmaid, Shi Mengwan. He rushed to the Four Seasons Hotel. Shi Mengwan had already arrived. Why did you come so late? Don't you know you're a bride today? Shi Mengwan ran a wedding dress shop. The wedding dress that Su Qingsang wanted was ordered from Shi Mengwan's shop, and it was specially customized by Shi Mengwan according to her figure and temperament. Yes, I know. Su Qingsang smiled at Shi Mengwan and followed her into the lounge. Shi Mengwan looked at the banquet hall outside the hotel. The decorations were almost done, but the guests had yet to arrive. It didn't matter if the guests didn't come, but none of Su Qingsang's parents or family showed up. As Su Qingsang sat down in front of the dressing table, the makeup artist stepped forward to put on her makeup. She took a step forward and stood behind Su Qingsang. What about your husband? What time was it? Why aren't they here yet? She didn't want to mention Su Qingsang's parents. She didn't want to upset Su Qingsang. But what about Wei Lenin? He had tried so hard to pursue Su Qingsang. We're getting married today. Why isn't anyone here yet? I don't know. Su Qingsang wasn't sure if Wei Lenin would come today. She had humiliated him like that yesterday. He might come today or he might not. You don't know? Qingsang you. Mengwan, if there's no groom later, you'll have to marry him. Would you like to walk the red carpet with me? What are you talking about? How could there be no groom? Sure, Mengwan was shocked by Su Qingsang's words. Make it clear. What do you mean? What I mean is, yesterday I found out that Wei Lenin was cheating on me, so I broke up with him. So he probably won't come today, right? Su Qingsang looked calm and collected, but Sure Mengwan almost went berserk. What? Say that again? Wei Lenin cheated on her? Done? Su Qingsang ignored the shocked look on the makeup artist's face and looked at Sure Mengwan calmly. You haven't said if you're willing to walk the red carpet with me. This was what she had been thinking about. Sure Mengwan was also a beauty compared to her looks, which were inclined towards the looks of Jiangnan women. However, this beauty had a pair of extremely thick sword-like eyebrows, which made her look a bit more heroic. In addition, she was 173 meters tall and had neat short hair. If she wore men's clothes and walked with her, she should be able to get away with it, right? Although her parents knew Sure Mengwan and could definitely tell, others couldn't. Of course she was willing, but two women walking the red carpet? What kind of joke was that? Of course she's not willing. A voice interrupted Sure Mengwan's words. The sudden clear male voice made Su Qingsang and the others look towards the door. Hua Jinyao stood at the door in a white suit. His appearance was completely different from yesterday's casual attire. It made him look much more mature and steady. The generous cut of the white suit made him look even taller and more muscular. At that moment, he was holding a bouquet of white roses in his hand and leaning against the door. When he saw the two women looking at him, he straightened his body and walked towards Su Qingsang step by step. Chapter 5. As he spoke, Hua Jinyao handed the bouquet in his hand to Su Qingsang. The smile on his face didn't fade. This is for you. Su Qingsang looked at the bouquet of roses, which was almost perfectly wrapped. She was very shocked. At this moment she could only look up at Hua Jinyao blankly. She was so impulsive yesterday mostly because she wanted to provoke Wei Lenin. A small part of the reason was that she wanted to fight back. After proposing to Hua Jinyao, she left in a hurry. The two of them didn't even leave a phone number. She didn't have any hope that Hua Jinyao would show up today. He had also thought about how to deal with it, how to deal with his parents and other people. But she didn't expect that Hua Jinyao not only appeared, but also appeared so dramatically. She didn't even have time to digest the situation in front of her. Especially when she saw Sure Mengwan's curious and gossipy face. Why are you here? Didn't you say so? Four Seasons Hotel, 5:30 p.m. I should have arrived early, right? As Hua Jinyao spoke, he raised his hand to look at the time. Don't be offended. I came here half an hour earlier. I wanted to adapt to the environment in advance. Su Qingsang was speechless. Her brain, which had always been quick to react and think fast, crashed for a moment. The situation in front of her was not what she had expected. Looking at Hua Jinyao, his eyes were smiling and his expression was relaxed. But in this kind of leisure she saw another part of his eyes. She thought about how he casually agreed to her proposal yesterday. Su Qingsang had a hunch that this man was definitely not as casual or harmless as he appeared to be. Was she really going to marry such a man? Su Qingsang's heart was full of uncertainty. Her lips moved and she instinctively wanted to refuse Hua Jinyao. However, he seemed to understand what she was thinking and stepped forward to hold her hand. Our wedding is in half an hour. I think you still need time to dress up. You have to be quick. Otherwise, it won't be good to keep the guests waiting for a long time. These words were said completely for Su Qingsang's sake. Su Qingsang only felt a headache. Because Hua Jinyao had undoubtedly reminded her of one thing again. That was that today's wedding was not just about her. It was about the Su family. Speaking of the Su family, Su Qingsang's face was pale, even with the powder she had just put on. Her father, Su Qinghui, represented the Su family, which was nothing in Lin City. However, the Li family represented by her mother, Li Qianxue, was very powerful. The Li family had been doing business since a few generations ago. After years of accumulation. It wasn't the first in Lin City. However, it was already a big enterprise that couldn't be underestimated. Especially after Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue got married, he had many tricks up his sleeve. Outwardly strong but internally unyielding. Under such circumstances, the Li family's business flourished in his hands. The Su family had become a prominent business in Lin City, and the children of the Su family were naturally looked up to. Growing up in such a family, even if Su Qingsang couldn't get married today, she wouldn't have much to do with it. Not to mention that Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were very tolerant of their children. Tolerant almost to the point of indulgence. But this tolerance was only for their own children. Although Su Qingsang's surname was also Su, she was also Su Qinghui's child. She was Su Qinghui's illegitimate daughter with another woman. Su Qingsang's existence in the Su family was very awkward. As an illegitimate daughter. Especially as an illegitimate daughter, Li Qianxue didn't like her very much. All these years, Su Qingsang had been trying to reduce her presence in the Su family. She tried to make herself invisible. But sometimes, the more you were afraid of, the more likely it would happen. After she entered university, she basically lived outside. Later, she almost didn't go home with the excuse of taking the postgraduate entrance exam. When she started working, she found a single apartment close to the hospital and moved in. She just avoided the Su family like this so that Li Qianxue wouldn't be unhappy. But sometimes she still had to go back to the Su family. A few months ago, on Su Qinghui's birthday, Su Qingsang had to go back to the Su family to celebrate his birthday. As a result, she drank some wine that day. When she went back to her room to rest, for some reason she bumped into a man. She didn't know why the man appeared in her room. When she realized it, she wanted to push the man away, but the two of them tripped and she fell on the man. Before she could get up from the man, the door opened. There was a group of people standing outside. And it was also at that time that she realized that the man she fell on was none other than Su Peijian's fiancé, Qiu Yanba. Qiu Yanba's Qiu family was more powerful than the Li family's business. The Li family and the Qiu family had been friends for a long time, and later on they worked together on many projects. Over and over again it was for the common interest. Of course, the most important thing was that Su Peijian liked Qiu Yanba. So, the Su family and the Qiu family engaged the two of them. No one expected that the man who was engaged to his sister would be pushed on the floor of her room by his sister. Even though Su Qingsang had drunk a little that day, she could still clearly remember the ugly faces of Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. Especially Li Qianxue, who criticized her. She said that she was shameless. It was obvious that she was unwilling to see Su Peijian marry well, so she deliberately seduced her brother-in-law. Su Qingsang couldn't defend herself. In order to prove her innocence, she could only say that she had a boyfriend. She was planning to get married soon. But because she didn't know how to tell the elders, she didn't mention it. At that time, Wei Lenin had been chasing her for more than half a year. She saw that he was a nice guy and she already wanted to accept him. At that time, she wanted to observe him for a while longer and see what would happen. She didn't expect that something like Qiu Yanba would happen. She had no choice but to drag Wei Lenin out, meet their parents, explain the situation, and then set up the wedding for that day. Time was very tight. But to Li Qianxue, she wanted to get rid of anything that could threaten her precious daughter. Su Qingsang understood Li Qianxue's thoughts. She was an illegitimate daughter, so in Li Qianxue's heart, she couldn't compare to Su Peijian. Wei Lenin's family was not as big as the Li family. It was just a small company. But she could see how Wei Lenin had treated her in the past few months. Marrying such a man, on one hand, could get rid of the accusation that she tried to steal Su Peijian's fiancé, and prove her innocence. On the other hand, it could completely separate her from the Su family. After all, as long as she got married, Li Qianxue wouldn't treat her as an imaginary enemy and think that she wanted to steal her daughter's man, right? She thought that after observing Wei Lenin for a while, she felt that he was honest and reliable and she could control him. But she didn't know that one could know a person's face but not his heart. A dog that doesn't bark is the best at biting. The day before the wedding there was an affair, and the groom was changed at the last minute. She knew that if she didn't get married today, she would just be scolded by Li Qianxue again. But deep down, she didn't want to bear the infamy that didn't belong to her. Now she looked at Hu Jiniao in front of her. She only knew this man's name but didn't know his background. Su Qingsang really didn't have any confidence. She was indeed hesitant about this marriage. She didn't want to get married. Even if she and Shi Mengwan were a pair of lilies and people thought that the Su family had a lesbian like her, she still didn't want to marry a stranger. Chapter 6. Su Qingsang hesitated, but the situation in front of her didn't allow her to hesitate. The makeup artist had already done her makeup. The wedding dress was in the lounge. She just had to put it on and go to the banquet hall. Hu Jiniao looked at Su Qingsang's face, which was originally gentle and pretty, gradually becoming more and more beautiful. His star-like eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a hint of deepness in them. Get changed first. I'll wait for you outside. Hua Jinyao's words made Su Qingsang even more uncertain. This was a wedding, not a game. Shi Mingwan quickly walked to Su Qingsang after Hua Jinyao closed the door. Qingsang, what happened? Who is this Hua Jinyao? How come I've never heard you mention him before? Su Qingsang didn't know how to answer Shi Mingwan. While she was changing, she hesitated whether or not to continue with the wedding. The zipper on the back of the dress was pulled up. She turned around and saw a beautiful bride in the mirror. Su Qingsang looked at Shi Mingwan and stepped forward to hold her hand. Yesterday I found out that Wei Lenin was cheating. Coincidentally, Hua Jinyao was by my side. Then I proposed to him. He said yes. Shi Mingwan's mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in it. But now, she regretted it. He didn't even have time to say these 3 words. Su Qingsang heard a clear female voice outside the lounge. Who are you? Why are you here? The door opened. Su Peijian stood at the door looking Hua Jinyao up and down. Su Qingsang wanted to explain, but Su Peijian had already come in and stood in front of Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, where's Wei Lenin? Isn't he the groom today? Everyone was aware of the wedding date that had been set previously. They had seen it a few times. The wedding was about to begin, but the groom was nowhere to be seen. Su Peijian's eyes unconsciously became a bit guarded. Su Peijian's appearance was completely different from Su Qingsang's. Su Qingsang took after her father, Su Qinghui, but not completely. She had a bit of Jiangnan gentleness. Su Peijian didn't look like Su Qinghui or Li Qianxue. Her features were bright and beautiful. At this moment, her eyebrows were raised with a bit of aggression. Didn't you want to get married before? You did this on purpose, didn't you? You're still thinking about revenge, sister? Su Qingsang held back her anger and said, I'm getting married today. I didn't do this on purpose. Su Peijian was Li Qianxue's daughter. She had no interest in arguing with her. What about Wei Lenin? The wedding ceremony was going to start in less than half an hour. Why wasn't he here yet? Or have you been abandoned by him? He doesn't want you anymore? Su Peijian's words were laced with venom and sarcasm. As a matter of fact, she was the daughter of the Su family, and she didn't like Su Qingsang, an illegitimate daughter. Su Qingsang was just one more person to eat in the Su family. She didn't care in the slightest. However, Su Qingsang's mistake was that she had actually tried to woo her man, which was unforgivable. Now that they saw that there was no groom in the wedding, they would naturally think that Su Qingsang was lying. You're wrong. It wasn't that Wei Lenin didn't want Qingsang. Su Qingsang doesn't want Wei Lenin anymore. As Hua Jinyao spoke, he took 2 steps forward and stood next to Su Qingsang. He reached out a hand and put it on Su Qingsang's shoulder. The style of her gown today was an off-the-shoulder style. When he put his hand down, his hand directly touched Su Qingsang's shoulder. Su Qingsang felt a bit uncomfortable. She instinctively wanted to break free from his hand. However, because of Su Peijian, she stopped moving. However, her body was stiff no matter how you looked at it. Chapter 7. Su Peijian's gaze swept over Hua Jinyao's face. The man was wearing a custom-made suit and looked dignified. However, after thinking about it for a while, the Li family could be considered a respectable figure in Lin City. She had never seen this man anywhere in Lin City. That meant that this man was either from Lin City or just a small character. She glanced at Su Qingsang. This person's taste was getting worse. The men she picked were all worse than the last. You're from Lin City? Sort of. What do you mean sort of? Yes means yes, no means no. My father is from Lin City. My mother isn't. The corner of Su Peijian's mouth twitched. How could he say that? May I know your name, sir? My surname is Hua. My name is Hua Jinyao. Hua. Su Peijian thought about it but couldn't think of any rich person with the surname Hua. Not wanting to make a mistake, she asked again, Mr. Hua, what's your job? It's not a high job. I'm just working in a small business. Su Peijian listened to Hua Jinyao's words and the disdain in her eyes increased. Oh really? You just said that Su Qingsang doesn't want Wei Lenin anymore and wants to marry you? What about you? Are you willing to? Would this man agree to changing the groom halfway through? Of course I am. Why else would I come today? Su Peijian nodded. Seeing that Su Qingsang was about to speak, she chuckled. You want to marry Su Qingsang? The Su family will naturally not object. However, there are some things that I have to say first. All the businesses that the Su family owns now belong to my mother. Su Qingsang is just an illegitimate daughter of our family. You won't get anything out of marrying her. Or rather, she's lying to you on purpose. You don't know the truth. Do you think marrying her will help you get in touch with the Su family? Although Hu Jinyao didn't look like a rich man, in terms of looks he was really exquisite. Even Qiu Yanba lost to him by 2 points. Su Peijian felt a little uncomfortable. How could an illegitimate daughter like Su Qingsang be able to find such a good man? Even if he was a poor man, he still made her feel bad. Naturally, she wouldn't be polite with her words. Su Qingsang didn't look too good. Shi Mingwan, who was standing behind her, was about to make a move on Su Peijian. This damned woman always liked to pick on Su Qingsang's identity. So what if she was Li Qinshue's daughter? Su Qingsang didn't look too good either. Today was her wedding day. Su Peijian had said this once when she and Wei Lenin met the Su family. And today he said something like that in front of Hu Jinyao. She had never been ashamed of her identity. However, Su Peijian's words made it seem like she was a liar who had lied to Hu Jinyao. Just as she was about to speak, Hu Jinyao gently pressed his hand on her shoulder. He looked at Su Peijian with a smile. Who says there's no benefit in marrying Qingsang? As he spoke, he turned to look at Su Qingsang. To be able to marry Su Qingsang is the greatest benefit of my life. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment and looked at the gentleness in Hu Jinyao's eyes. For a moment, she almost thought that the man in front of her was her lover of many years. But God knew that they had only met for the first time yesterday. Regardless of whether Hu Jinyao was acting or had other motives at this moment, Su Qingsang sincerely thanked him for being on her side. Is that so? Su Peijian's words were rebutted. Her expression was definitely not good. If that's the case, then I wish you a happy marriage in advance. Thank you. Hu Jinyao smiled calmly and said, We will. Su Qingsang looked at the faint smile on Hu Jinyao's face and was dumbfounded. How thick-skinned did a person have to be like this? However, before she could think about whether Hu Jinyao was thick-skinned or whether he was lying, Su Qingsang smiled. Chapter 8. Su Qingsang was the illegitimate daughter of the Su family, so the wedding couldn't be too grand. But no matter how little Su Qinghui cared about his daughter, because the wedding was a daughter of the Su family, there would be many guests. The relatives of the Su family, some business friends, and some people who were not as important as the Su family and wanted to build a relationship with the Su family all came. More than 20 tables were filled. The wedding march started. Su Qingsang had no way to turn back. Today we are gathered here for Wei. The MC didn't finish his sentence and met the groom's eyes. Hu Jinyao. Ha! The MC was stunned. My name is Hu Jinyao, Hu Jinyao repeated. He had a faint smile on his face, but his hand on Su Qingsang's waist was firm and undeniable. The MC took a few seconds to react. He also realized that the groom wasn't the one who came to the wedding banquet. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. The experienced MC immediately reacted. Today we are gathered here for the wedding of Mr. Hu Jinyao and Miss Su Qingsang. The light shone on Su Qingsang's face. Su Qingsang listened to the MC's speech and looked at the faces of the people below. She felt that this wedding was not real at all. But this unreal wedding went quite smoothly. It went smoothly until Su Qingsang returned to the lounge after the ceremony. She changed into a dress and was about to return to the banquet hall when a figure rushed in front of Su Qingsang. Qingsang. Su Qingsang was startled by Wei Lenin's sudden appearance. She took 2 steps back. Why are you here? Today is our wedding. Of course I have to come. When Wei Lenin spoke, he felt wronged. He didn't sleep well last night. He spent half a day talking but still couldn't convince Li Rongrong to abort the child. He was so angry that he called the doctor early in the morning and asked the doctor to arrange the surgery. He didn't know that Li Rongrong overheard his call and ran away early in the morning. It took him some effort to find Li Rongrong, and he had already sent her to the hospital for surgery. Seeing that he didn't have much time, he hired 2 people to watch Li Rongrong and make sure she abort the child before letting Li Rongrong leave. When he rushed to the Four Seasons Hotel, he found that the wedding had already started. Only then did he panic. He reached out to hold Su Qingsang's hand. Wei Lenin's stubbled face looked a little haggard. Qingsang, it was my fault yesterday. It's all my fault. Will you marry me? We're going to re-announce the wedding. Don't worry. I've already had Li Rongrong's child aborted. No one will come to disturb us. Really? Su Qingsang looked at Wei Lenin, who kept talking to himself. For a moment she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. How could she not know? Wei Lenin actually had such a shameless side to him? Get out of my way. She didn't want to talk to Wei Lenin anymore, so she walked past him and was about to leave. Wei Lenin didn't give up and reached out to grab her. Now, everyone in the Wei family knew that he was going to marry Su Qingsang, the Li family. He would never let Su Qingsang go like this. However, before his hand could touch Su Qingsang, someone grabbed it. His opponent's strength was so great that his facial features were distorted. "What do you want to do to my wife?" Su Qingsang really thought that she was going to be grabbed by Wei Lenin. When she saw Hu Jingyao standing in front of her, she inexplicably felt relieved. However, Hu Jingyao's next words made her almost choke on her own saliva. Chapter 9. Wei Lenin was dumbfounded when he saw Hu Jingyao. He looked at him and then at Su Qingsang. You really want to marry him?" Hu Jingyao looked at the shock on Wei Lenin's face. He used some force and easily shook off Wei Lenin's hand. "I'm sorry. It's not that she really wants to marry me. She has already married me." Hu Jingyao took a step back and put his arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. "Just now. We had a wedding." "Crazy, really crazy." Wei Lenin stared at Su Qingsang. "Qingsang, you don't even love him. You don't even know who this man is or what he does. How can you be so careless? The Wei family was not as good as the Li family or even the Su family. But in Lin City, no matter what, he was still considered a respectable person. Who does this Hu Jingyao think he is? Many people in ancient times got married first and then fell in love." Su Qingsang's eyes were indifferent. She didn't care about Wei Lenin's words at all. "I'm doing well. Qingsang. Don't worry. I wanted to get married. I chose the man. If anything happens in the future, it has nothing to do with you." Su Qingsang seemed to know what Wei Lenin was going to say and quickly interrupted him. She took the opportunity to hold Hu Jinyao's arm. "Let's go. We still need to toast." "You heard that?" Hu Jingyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Su Qingsang. The provocation in his eyes was obvious. Wei Lenin was furious. But looking at Hu Jingyao, who was a head taller than him, and the strength he used to squeeze his arm, he was terrified. He wanted to fight, but Hu Jingyao shook his fist at him before he left. He didn't dare to chase after him. It was none of Su Qingsang's business how angry Wei Lenin was behind her. When she turned the corner and was about to pull her hand back, she found that Hu Jingyao held her hand even tighter. "We are husband and wife now." Su Qingsang's mouth twitched. They had only known each other for half a day, but she found that this man seemed to want a yard after taking an inch. Hu Jingyao was wearing a white suit earlier. Now he was wearing a black one. Su Qingsang also changed from a white wedding dress to a red dress. The two of them, one in red and one in black, entered the banquet hall arm in arm. Toasts usually started from the main table. Other than Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue, Su Peijian and Su Yusin, Su Peijian's fiancé Qiu Yanba was also there. Su Peijian's face darkened. When she saw the two of them coming over with their wine glasses, her expression was especially ugly. She was blessed by the heavens. She was the daughter of Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui. Ever since he was young, he could get whatever he wanted. If there was anything that made her uncomfortable, it would be Su Qingsang's existence. When she was born, Su Qingsang was born around the same time, just a few days later. What did this mean? It meant that Su Qinghui had betrayed his mother and their marriage a long time ago. However, such a piece of evidence of betrayal had to be left in the Su family. It was placed under Li Qianxue's nose and was an eyesore to her family. Was there anything more painful than this? Su Peijian knew a little about Wei Lenin. He was the boss of a small company. He wouldn't have a bright future. He probably wanted to marry Su Qingsang because he wanted to build a relationship between the Su family and the Li family. Su Peijian didn't care about such a person. But this Hu Jingyao? His family didn't look like much, but he was quite brave. He actually dared to give her a soft rebuff. Su Peijian didn't like Su Qingsang and she disliked Hu Jingyao even more. He was too handsome, even more handsome than Qiu Yanba. A man with such a face, even if he didn't have money, should not be interested in a worthless illegitimate daughter like Su Qingsang. Seeing Su Qingsang and Hu Jingyao raise their glasses to toast their parents and say some well wishes as usual, Qiu Yanba watched Su Qingsang's glass come to him. Out of politeness, Qiu Yanba was about to stand up, but Su Peijian refused to move. Not only did she refuse to stand up, but she also forcefully pulled Qiu Yanba's hand to make him sit down. Not only did she not take the glass herself, but she also snatched the glass from Qiu Yanba's hand and put it back on the table. Chapter 10. Su Peijian leaned against the backrest and glared at Su Qingsang. She looked at Su Qingsang with obvious dissatisfaction and provocation. That gaze seemed to be saying, "I'm not giving you face, what can you do?" Su Qinghui frowned slightly. Li Qianxue sat still. She was just an illegitimate daughter. She was already giving her a lot of face by coming to her wedding. Qiu Yanba didn't like Su Peijian's aggressive attitude, but he didn't want to offend the Li family and the Su family for Su Qingsang. After all, Su Peijian was the fiancé that the Qiu family had chosen for him. Su Qingsang didn't expect Su Peijian to be so nice to her, but she was a little surprised that Su Peijian didn't give her face and was so direct. She instinctively turned to look at Hu Jinyao. Just as she was about to say something, Hu Jinyao had already taken her hand and walked to the next table. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. Before she could say anything, her body had already been pulled forward by him. Su Peijian didn't expect Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao to ignore her like that. With a cold look on his face, he jumped up and stood in front of Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao. Wait. What's up? Su Qingsang had nothing against Su Peijian. Putting herself in his shoes, if she knew that her father had betrayed his marriage and had an illegitimate daughter, she would be just as angry as her father. But understanding and acceptance were two different things. To put it bluntly, she wasn't the one who did these things. Li Qianshua's occasional cold treatment was one thing, but she really didn't want to see Su Peijian's cold face. You're getting married today, shouldn't you propose a toast to me, your sister? Hu Jinyao's face darkened. Looking at the arrogant face of the woman in front of him, he wanted to drag Su Qingsang away. Of course. Su Qingsang didn't give Hu Jinyao a chance. She leaned against Hu Jinyao and gently swirled the wine glass in her hand. Sister, I thought you didn't like me calling you sister, and you wouldn't like me toasting to you. You? Su Peijian realized that Su Qingsang was getting bolder and bolder. How dare she talk back to her like that? You really don't like it when you toast me. I don't even like you appearing in front of me. However, they were sisters after all. Since you're going to get married, you should at least give me an explanation. Otherwise, when you walk out of the Su family in the future, when others say that you have no manners, our Su family will also be implicated. Before Su Qingsang could say anything, Su Peijian looked at Hu Jinyao and continued. After all, you're a married man now. Since they were married, it was better for them to maintain their virginity. Remember to stay away from Yanbo next time. Don't forget that he's your brother-in-law. Don't covet other people's husbands every day because you can't find a good man. Furthermore, you're staring at your own brother-in-law. If word of this gets out, the Su family's face will be completely lost. These words were too impolite. Su Qingsang looked very embarrassed. Not to mention that there were so many guests today. Today was her wedding day with Hu Jinyao. Why couldn't she see her doing well? Even if her marriage with Hu Jinyao was fake and an act. However, Su Peijian was her sister. What good would it do her to ruin her reputation like this? Moreover, she had never thought of seducing Qiu Yanba. She was so angry that she was about to fight back, but Hu Jinyao suddenly put his arm around her shoulder and at the same time, raised his other hand slightly. The wine in his glass, which was originally half a glass, was poured straight onto Su Peijian's face. Chapter 11. Su Peijian's face turned green. Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue and Qiu Yanba all stood up. Hu Jinyao didn't seem to notice their tense atmosphere. He didn't care if his actions would be seen by the other guests and gossiped about. He glanced at Su Peijian coldly. His tone was even colder than his eyes. Your mouth is too smelly. Let me wash it for you. Hu Jinyao. Su Peijian had heard the name several times. It was hard for her not to remember it, especially now. Hu Jinyao was a synonym for death in her heart. What? Hu Jinyao's eyes were quite unkind. He glanced at Su Peijian's face and then at Qiu Yanba, who was standing behind her. Is your man more handsome than me? Or is his figure better than mine? As long as Qingsang is not blind, you should know who is better, right? You? Su Peijian's face turned green. Not only because Hu Jinyao poured wine on her. More importantly, what Hu Jinyao said was the truth. Qiu Yanba was 1.82 meters tall. He was considered tall. But Hu Jinyao was at least 1.88 meters tall. His inverted triangle was tall and straight. His facial features were handsome and stylish. Qiu Yanba could also be considered a handsome man. But his handsomeness was not as good as Hu Jinyao's. In terms of appearance, it was indeed as Hu Jinyao had said. Really? Maybe she's blind? Su Peijian's heart was filled with hatred. Her eyes became more and more unkind. After all, Yanba is not only outstanding in appearance. He is the heir of the Qiu family and the next head of the family. Oh. Hu Jinyao didn't look afraid when he heard Su Peijian's words. Instead, he looked a bit playful. So you don't like his appearance or his figure, but his family background? Hu Jinyao looked at Qiu Yanba with a bit of sympathy. Don't worry, I understand. I won't say anything. Su Peijian's face turned from green to black because of Hua Jinyao's words. What? Don't confuse me. I didn't mean that at all. You don't have to explain to me whether you meant that or not. Hua Jinyao pouted at Qiu Yanbao as he spoke. Su Qingsang was dumbfounded the moment Su Peijian was splashed with wine. Just like that, she watched as Hua Jinyao turned a disadvantage into an advantage, from passivity to initiative, and easily turned the wedding into his home field. Looking at Su Peijian, she was rendered speechless. No matter what she answered, it would be wrong. Although she wasn't so happy that she danced with joy, she was secretly pleased. Su Qinghui's face darkened. Li Qinshua's face was cold and she was about to speak. Hua Jinyao put his arm around her waist. Sorry, my hand slipped just now. I think Miss Su is a magnanimous person and won't be calculative with ordinary citizens like us, right? Qingsang, let's go. Let's continue to toast. He spoke a long string of words without stopping for breath. Before she could react, Su Qingsang was stunned. The man had already happily led Su Qingsang to the next table. Su Peijian wanted to catch up with him. However, Qiu Yanbao grabbed her hand. Your clothes are all wet. Go and change. No matter what Su Peijian said at this moment, she was already at a disadvantage today. Looking at Hua Jinyao's back, a thoughtful look flashed across Qiu Yanbao's gentle face. This Hua Jinyao was not simple. However, just like Su Peijian, he couldn't think of any family with the surname Hua in Lin City. He gestured for Su Peijian to change, then turned to look at Li Qianxue. Auntie, have you heard of a family with the surname Hua in Lin City? No. Naturally, Li Qianxue also saw the scene just now. This Hua Jinyao was indeed not a simple person. It seemed that she might have to get someone to investigate this Hua Jinyao's background. After all, she still had to guard against Su Qingsang's sudden marriage. She wondered if she had any ulterior motives. Chapter 12. Su Qingsang had no idea that Hua Jinyao's extraordinary performance had successfully raised the vigilance of the Su family. He was afraid that after Su Qingsang got married, she would snatch the Su family's property. However, even if she knew, Su Qingsang wouldn't take it to heart. After all, she really had no interest in the Su family's assets. After toasting with Hua Jinyao, Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao differently. This person was obviously a temporary groom change. She had randomly pulled them over to make up the numbers. Hua Jinyao didn't know anyone else in the banquet hall. There were even 2 tables that were occupied by Wei Lenin's relatives. He, on the other hand, did not feel uncomfortable at all. It was as if she was getting married. No, this was his marriage. Also, wasn't this man a little too engrossed? She was clearly just casually asking him to put on this show. But look at Hua Jinyao's attitude. Which part of him looked like he was acting? Disregarding everything else, she couldn't help but admire his guts for throwing a glass of wine at Su Peijian. Drinking his sister-in-law's wine on the first day of marriage, how could he not be daring? That scene was seen by many people. Just now, Shi Mengwan even whispered to her in private. Don't care if you're Wei Lenin or Wei Sinan. I think Hua Jinyao is a good choice. Since you dared to go against Su Peijian so openly, I will definitely protect you in the future. Alright, he's the one. As he spoke, he didn't forget to pat her on the shoulder as if saying, hurry up and do it, I'll support you. Su Qingsang did not know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't believe that Hua Jinyao would dare to offend Su Peijian. Maybe it was just like what he had just introduced to his parents. Because he wasn't from Lin City, he didn't know the status of the Su family in Lin City at all. What's wrong? Tired? Hua Jinyao put down the glass and turned around to find Su Qingsang staring at him. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable being caught red-handed by Hua Jinyao. Looking at the guests who were starting to leave, she gently shook her head and said, I'm fine. Back then he was the professor's assistant. It was not a problem to perform side surgeries for more than 10 hours. She really didn't care about this tiredness. He wasn't tired, but he was a little annoyed. Following these people, they feigned civility and exchanged pleasantries. How many of them sincerely wished her to get married? Most of the time, they were just trying to establish a relationship with the Li family and the Su family. She was already impatient to deal with these things, not to mention that she was just an illegitimate daughter. She was very annoyed, but she didn't expect Hua Jinyao to be more enthusiastic than she was, which surprised her. Looking at Hua Jinyao's face, she was dazed again. Yesterday she had been angered by Wei Lenin, and today she was in such a chaotic situation. To be honest, it was only now that she had the time to take a closer look at the man in front of her. Yesterday she had only wanted to praise this man for being handsome. Now it seemed that he was more than handsome. His clothes matched the aura he exuded. People would believe it if they said he was a noble young master. But such a man had agreed to marry her. He even accompanied her to make such a fuss today. Su Qingsang had neither power nor influence, so she was not valued by the Su family. She admitted that she had nothing to gain. She was also the one who chose the man, and she was the one who wanted to get married. But after half a day she only had a name and age. He didn't even know what Hu Jingyao did for a living. If you are tired, let's go back and rest now. Hu Jingyao's words made Su Qingsang come back to her senses. She swallowed her saliva. Hearing the word go back, she started to feel nervous. Go back where? Go home, of course. Hu Jingyao said matter-of-factly, since we are already married, of course we have to go home. You mean go back to my house? What else? Hu Jingyao held Su Qingsang with one arm and looked at the banquet hall with the other. Or go back to the room upstairs. No matter what, today is our wedding night. We should go to the presidential suite upstairs for a romantic night. Chapter 13. Who was going to be romantic with him for one night? Su Qingsang immediately became nervous after hearing Hu Jingyao's words. Not to mention anything else, but they really did book a room upstairs. Wei Lenin's house was quite far from where the banquet was held. Su Qingsang's place was close to the hospital, but it was also a bit far from here. Although she was Su Qingsang's illegitimate daughter, the Su family still had to keep up appearances. They had everything they needed. Naturally, they also booked a presidential suite on the top floor. Hu Jingyao knew what was going on at first glance. Without another word, he led Su Qingsang upstairs. Su Qingsang hadn't recovered from her nervousness when Hu Jingyao took her back to the room. As the cold air blew in, Su Qingsang's rationality came back instantly. She and Hu Jingyao were married today, but this husband and wife was fake. Since it was fake, there was no reason for them to do it again. That Hu Jingyao, look at us. She turned around to face Hu Jingyao and wanted to explain, but she found that he was looking at the decorations in the room. Following his gaze, Su Qingsang's face turned red all the way to her neck. Not to mention the gaudy roses that covered the floor in the room. Not to mention the white candlesticks in front of the dining table and the Western-style dishes. There was a set of pajamas in the middle of the big bed. That was Shi Mengwan's wedding gift. She said it was mysterious before, but she didn't expect it to be waiting for her here. The overly feminine design made Su Qingsang feel uncomfortable. She quickly walked forward and grabbed the light and small pajamas that couldn't cover anything and rolled it into a ball. Just as she was about to throw it away, Hu Jingyao had already walked to her side. He reached out his long arm to take the thing in her hand. Su Qingsang was nervous. Without thinking, she hid the cloth behind her. What are you doing? Hu Jingyao looked at her blushing face and the smile in his eyes deepened. I'm not doing anything. What are you doing? What are you hiding? Hiding what? What was she hiding? He clearly saw it all, but he said it on purpose. Su Qingsang blushed. Shi Mengwan's gift made her very embarrassed. She was afraid that Hu Jingyao would misunderstand that she was just that impatient. Seeing Hu Jingyao stretch out his hand, she transferred the thin fabric to her other hand without hesitation. Hu Jingyao had already pulled her hand over to his. Instead of the pajamas, she was wearing a ring. That was today's wedding ring, which had been prepared early in the morning. Wei Lenin had prepared it before. Wei Lenin and her were the ones who were going to get married, so naturally, he had prepared the ring. So ugly. Su Qingsang raised her head to look at him. What did he mean? The ring is so ugly. Hu Jingyao took off the ring, put it on his palm and looked at it. Yang Wei picked it out, didn't he? It's really too ugly. You, whose surname is Yang? Su Qingsang wanted to take the ring back. The ring was not ugly and she had chosen it herself. However, at that time she only wanted to get rid of the Su family, so she didn't put much thought into it and just randomly picked one. Throw it away and get another one. As Hu Jingyao spoke, the ring flew out. Su Qingsang's eyes widened and she instinctively reached out to grab it. This ring cost more than 100,000 yuan. Even if it was really ugly, he didn't have to throw it away like that, did he? What a big heart this man had. She was so anxious to grab it that she forgot about the pajamas in her other hand. The moment she grabbed the ring, Hu Jingyao also successfully grabbed the pajamas in his hand. Su Qingsang put the ring away and looked up to see Hu Jingyao with a faint smile on his lips. He opened the pajamas in front of her. Chapter 14. Su Qingsang was still holding the ring in one hand. She stared blankly at the light, thin fabric sticking to her body. She was clearly wearing other clothes underneath, but she felt as if she was naked now. Without thinking, she waved his hand away and took a big step back. You. Before she could say, "Take it away," Su Qing-sang, who had forgotten that the bed was behind her, fell onto the bed. Before she could get up, Hua Jinyao had already sat on the edge of the bed. "Tisk, honey, can't you wait?" At this moment, not only Su Qing-sang's face, but even the soles of her feet were red. She quickly wanted to get up, but Hua Jinyao blocked her body. She bumped into his body and fell back onto the bed again. With her limbs spread wide, she watched as Hua Jinyao's body was stacked on top of hers. "Don't worry, don't rush. I'll be happy to satisfy you." As he spoke, Hua Jinyao's face moved closer to her. Seeing that the two lips were getting closer and closer, Su Qing-sang pushed Hua Jinyao's body away without thinking. She sat up and shrank back a long distance. I'm sweaty. I'm going to take a shower." After saying this, she hurriedly got off the bed from the other side and quickly ran in the direction of the bathroom. Hua Jinyao was still holding the piece of cloth in one hand and supporting himself on the bed with the other. Watching the little woman run away, there was a slight smile in his eyes. Just as he was about to start chasing her into the bathroom, his phone suddenly rang. He took out his phone and looked at the screen. The number displayed on it made the smile on his face slowly disappear, and his expression became serious. Holding the phone, Hua Jinyao glanced at the bathroom, then walked to the balcony to answer the phone. When he came back, the seriousness on his face was gone, and he had a carefree look on his face again. Su Qing-sang didn't realize that she had done something wrong until she finished taking a shower. She ran in such a hurry that she didn't bring her pajamas in. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if she brought the pajamas in, she wouldn't wear them. However, there were no clothes here, so she could only go out in a bath towel. Unfortunately, the bath towel here was extremely short. The way it was wrapped around her body was no different from the pajamas she was wearing before. Looking at the towel that barely covered her thighs, Su Qing-sang felt awkward. She was already prepared to marry Wei Lenin, so having sex with him was inevitable. But Hua Jinyao, she didn't even know who he was or what his background was. Su Qing-sang was still hesitating. Someone knocked on the bathroom door twice. She was so shocked that her heart skipped 2 beats. With one hand covering her chest and the other tightly gripping the hem of the towel, she didn't know whether to open the door or not. There were 2 more knocks on the door. It was impossible for Su Qing-sang to stay in the bathroom for the rest of her life. She opened the door with the mentality that she would be stabbed no matter what. Outside, Hua Jinyao was leaning against the door frame. He had a faint smile on his face, and the expression on his face was exactly the same as when he teased her earlier. Su Qing-sang blushed. She quickly lowered her head and was about to walk past him. Hua Jinyao's eyes swept over her body. With just one glance he could see her current state clearly. She had a slender and well-proportioned figure. Her shoulders were like jade and her skin was like cream. He didn't know that she had such a good figure under the white coat. "I'm done. Hurry up and go." Even if Su Qing-sang didn't raise her head, she could feel Hua Jinyao's overly passionate gaze. She walked past him uncomfortably, but Hua Jinyao stretched out his long arms and directly circled her body in his arms. Chapter 15. Su Qing-sang was embarrassed, very embarrassed. In the past few years she had devoted herself to her studies. Being a doctor wasn't easy, especially when she entered the school a year earlier than the average person. She studied obstetrics and gynecology, which was rare for male students. She didn't interact with many men in her life. Otherwise, Li Qinxue and Su Qinghui wouldn't have suspected that she was thinking about her brother-in-law just because she fell on Qiu Yanba. As for Wei Lenin, she didn't like him in the first place. Other than letting Wei Lenin kiss her on the cheek twice, the two of them didn't do anything more intimate. She studied medicine and was a bit of a neat freak. She really couldn't stand the two of them exchanging saliva and felt disgusted. So when she was suddenly held in Hua Jinyao's arms, their bodies pressed tightly against each other, and she only had a bath towel around her, she felt very uncomfortable. "Let go of me." Hua Jinyao stared at Su Qing-sang's small face. When he saw her yesterday, even the white gown couldn't hide her beauty. When he saw her today, she was wearing a wedding gown and looked very beautiful. But it wasn't as beautiful as now. Her graceful figure was in his arms, and her body still had the fragrance of a bath. He couldn't help but lower his head and sniff gently. It smells so good." Su Qing-sang felt more and more uncomfortable. She pushed him hard but couldn't move him at all. Instead, her body bounced back into his arms. Hua Jinyao couldn't help smiling. "You want to reject me? I like it." The mischievousness in his words made Su Qing-sang blush. Without thinking, she raised her foot to step on Hua Jinyao's foot. She didn't expect that she was wearing hotel slippers. She didn't feel threatened at all. Su Qingsang was extremely embarrassed. She raised her eyes and glared at the bastard in front of her. "Let go of me." Her watery eyes were filled with a bit of resistance and shame. Hua Jingyao was stunned for a moment and loosened his grip a little. Su Qingsang took the opportunity to quickly move away. "Go take a shower." Su Qingsang walked to the side, feeling very uncomfortable. She didn't want to be alone with Hua Jingyao now, so she could only send him to the bathroom. Hua Jingyao looked at her deeply and nodded gently. "Okay, I'll go take a shower." He gave her a meaningful look before entering the bathroom. As soon as the door was closed, Su Qingsang quickly walked to the wardrobe. When Hua Jingyao came out of the shower, the main light in the room had been turned off, leaving only the small bedside lamp on. 2/3 of the spacious bed had been occupied, and the person was curled up in a small corner. If it weren't for the slightly raised blanket, he wouldn't have been sure that there was a person sleeping inside. Hua Jingyao narrowed his eyes, took a few steps forward, and sat down on the bed. Other than the sound of the air conditioner blowing cold air, the room was extremely quiet. He could clearly hear Su Qingsang's heavy breathing. The corners of Hua Jinyao's lips curled up into a faint smile that he didn't even notice. He lifted the blanket and laid down. He could feel that the person's breathing had gotten heavier. Hua Jinyao stretched out his long arm and directly rolled the ball into his arms. The person in his arms was wearing a thick hotel bathrobe. She didn't feel hot at all. Su Qingsang's body was very stiff. Today was their wedding night. If Hua Jinyao wanted to do something, she really couldn't resist. Even if she wanted to resist, the difference in physical strength between her and the other party was too great. She felt his hand on her waist through the bath towel. The hot palm made her feel as if her back was on fire. Chapter 16. Su Qingsang didn't dare to move. She could feel the breathing above her head. She could also feel the warmth of the arm around her waist. Not only that, when her body was turned over and pressed against his chest, the tip of her nose was filled with the fresh masculine scent of his body. She wasn't used to all of this. She twisted her body uncomfortably. But it deepened the compatibility between the two of them. Su Qingsang was frightened. Now she didn't dare to move at all. Her hands were pressed against Hua Jinyao's chest. The overly hot and smooth touch made her quickly withdraw her hands. She was still thinking about how to avoid today's disaster. But that person didn't do anything else but hug her. Su Qingsang was stunned. She didn't understand what Hua Jinyao was up to, but she didn't dare to move. It was actually very uncomfortable to be held in a strange position in his arms. She didn't even dare to look up at Hua Jinyao's expression. "You?" Suddenly hearing the voice above her head, Su Qingsang said without thinking, "I'm very tired. I'm asleep." There was silence. Su Qingsang heard a chuckle above her head. She was a little angry. She wanted to say something, but forced herself to close her eyes and sleep. She said in her heart, "I'm asleep, I'm asleep, I'm asleep." She didn't dare to relax until she felt the other's next move. She was still full of vigilance. It was just that yesterday's surgery and today's tiring day, her vigilance slowly began to relax. Her eyelids began to fight. Slowly she actually fell asleep. Until the body of the person in his arms completely relaxed and her breathing became stable. Hua Jinyao finally let go of his hand slightly, stepped back a little, and looked at the small face of the person in his arms. It wasn't as fake as the smile during the day. It wasn't like yesterday's forced smile. Sleeping, she slightly pouted her red lips, her cheeks were red, and a few strands of hair fell disobediently on the side of her face. He reached out and brushed away the few strands of her disobedient hair. Looking at Su Qingsang's plain but delicate face, his heart was a little moved. He leaned in and gave her a peck on the lips. Su Qingsang frowned slightly in her sleep, which made him laugh. This kind of lecherous behavior was really unlike him. But then again, today was his wedding night. Even if he really did something, he would be allowed to do it. However, he really didn't plan to do anything today. He tightened his arms and adjusted Su Qingsang to an angle that fit him perfectly. Only then did she close her eyes. Su Qingsang slept exceptionally well that night, probably because she was too tired during the day. When she woke up in the morning, she couldn't even tell where she was. He opened his eyes and rolled around on the bed. But when she looked up, she actually saw a painting of a naked man. Su Qingsang woke up almost instantly. She sat up, hugged the big bundle of quilt and curled up on the bed looking at Hua Jinyao. "You? Why is he not wearing clothes? Now why was he here? Good morning." Hua Jinyao acted as if he hadn't noticed his current state. Are you satisfied with what you saw? Are you satisfied? Su Qingsang glanced in the direction of his words. When she realized that she had seen something she shouldn't have, she quickly looked up. When she saw Hua Jinyao's half-smile, she realized that she had done something stupid. She immediately turned her face away uncomfortably. Chapter 17. A teasing voice came from behind her. Su Qingsang was very embarrassed. In his heart he despised himself a little. What had he not seen during his anatomy classes? How could he bear to let her make a fuss over nothing? There was nothing special about Hua Jinyao's physique. It was just that his figure was slightly better than the average person's, and his muscles were stronger than the average person's. His six-pack was just a little more sexy than the average person's. Su Qingsang found that when she was thinking, she recalled what she had just seen. She felt even more embarrassed. Honey. Hua Jinyao was going to put on his clothes, but he didn't. He walked directly to the bed and said, "You haven't told me if you're satisfied." Su Qingsang didn't want to waste time with this man. She quickly got off the bed and rushed into the bathroom without looking back. He scooped up a handful of cold water to wash his face, using this action to cool down his cheeks. There was nothing to be uncomfortable about. Su Qingsang just treat him as a patient. Yes, that's it. Su Qingsang stayed in the bathroom for nearly half an hour before coming out. She was relieved to find that Hua Jinyao was no longer in the room. He changed into the clothes he had left here and picked up his bag. Su Qingsang was about to go home. Only then did she realize that Hua Jinyao hadn't left. Instead, he had ordered room service. The table in the living room was filled with breakfast. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. She looked at the breakfast in front of her and was lost in thought. Hungry? Come and eat. Hua Jinyao sat down at the table and found that Su Qingsang was still in a daze, so he called her. Su Qingsang put down her handbag and walked over. She looked at Hua Jinyao again. Yesterday he was just acting with her, wasn't he? He didn't touch her after that and maintained his gentlemanly demeanor. Didn't that mean that he thought that yesterday was just an act and didn't take it seriously? Now that the show is over, why is he still here? By the way, have you booked a honeymoon trip after the wedding? Su Qingsang shook her head instinctively and said, No, I didn't. There were a lot of things to do in the hospital and it was her first year as an intern. She had already told Wei Lenin in advance that the two of them would not go on a honeymoon after they got married. Do you have holidays? Yes. 3 days. What's the plan for these 3 days? Oh. She still had a paper to submit. How would he have the time to make arrangements? Su Qingsang didn't realize that she had answered Hua Jinyao's question too quickly until she finished answering. However, he picked up a shrimp dumpling and placed it in front of her. Have breakfast. Let's go home. Go home? Go home. Su Qingsang didn't realize until she got in the car that Hua Jinyao was talking about her home. As the illegitimate daughter of the Su family, she naturally could not compare to Su Peixian, who was the legitimate daughter of the Su family. However, neither Su Qinghui nor Li Qianxue wanted others to call them mean. Therefore, in addition to her normal expenses, she also had pocket money. When she was 18, Su Qinghui bought her an apartment very close to the medical school as a rite of passage for her to get into the medical school. When she graduated from medical school, she was gifted a Honda that cost less than 200,000 yuan. Compared to Su Peixian, this kind of equipment was not even worth mentioning. However, Su Qingsang was very content. After all, the price of goods was very high now. To be able to have her own humble abode in Lin City, where every inch of land was extremely expensive, and she didn't have to take the bus or the subway, she had nothing to be dissatisfied about. More importantly, this was her own house. Unless it was necessary, she didn't have to go back to the Su house to face the big family. The apartment was very close to the medical school and the hospital where Su Qingsang worked. It was a 3-bedroom apartment with 2 living rooms. Su Qingsang used her own pocket money to decorate the apartment in the style she liked. This was her little nest. Usually, other than Shi Mengwan, no one else would come here. Even Wei Lenin had only been here once. To Su Qingsang, this was truly her own place. However, this place was not just hers anymore. There was also Hua Jinyao. Chapter 18. The living room was very bright and spacious. The light was also good. The beige decoration made people feel warm and at home. But now Hua Jinyao, who was more than 1.88 meters tall, was standing in her living room, making the whole living room feel a little cramped all of a sudden. Hua Jinyao's immense pressure made Su Qingsang wonder if she was out of her mind. Otherwise, why would she agree to let Hua Jinyao come to her house? Before he could think clearly, he drove the car home. You. Su Qingsang thought about how to phrase it without hurting Hu Jinyao. Don't you have your own home? No. Didn't you say you were from Lin City? Yes. Hu Jinyao nodded. I'm from Lin City. But I also said that my father is from Lin City, but my mother isn't. Then my father left Lin City a long time ago and works elsewhere. So we don't have a home in Lin City anymore. Then before you, I just came to Lin City to do something, Hu Jinyao said without any embarrassment. I lived in a hotel before. But it was true, but it felt weird. Then now I'm done. Then you're going back to your home? Since it was done, he should leave, right? No. Hu Jinyao moved his index finger and said, Since we're married now, I'll be wherever you are. Su Qingsang's lips moved. Looking at Hu Jinyao, she felt that something was wrong. Then what about your job? I don't have a job for now. When Hu Jinyao spoke, he seemed a little embarrassed. You won't dislike me because of this, will you? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao's handsome face, and the strange feeling became more and more obvious. But didn't you say that you worked in a small company? Yes. Hu Jinyao nodded and the embarrassment disappeared. He looked a little more matter-of-factly. I work in C City, but I'm married to you now. Of course I want to be with you. Naturally, I told the boss that I won't go back to work. So I'm currently unemployed. Su Qingsang's mouth opened and closed again. Hu Jinyao talked about it as if it were the weather. She didn't know what to say. What did you do before? Perhaps she could take a look or ask her friend to see if there was any suitable job for him. Hu Jinyao didn't answer her question. Instead, he reached out and held her in his arms. She wasn't used to such intimacy and couldn't help but want to reject it. Hu Jinyao lowered his head and looked into her eyes. Are you worried that I don't have a job so I can't support you? Su Qingsang didn't even care about the teasing in his words. She squirmed uncomfortably and said, Let me go if you want to talk. You haven't said it yet. Are you worried that I can't afford to raise you? I don't need you to raise me. Su Qinghui had given her a house and a car to shut people up, and he had also given her a shop with a good location for her wedding. She was now past her internship. He earned enough money to support himself. Then you can raise me. Seeing the resistance on Su Qingsang's face, Hu Jinyao put on a careless smile and said, Before I find a job, I can only trouble you to support me. As a man, he wasn't embarrassed at all to ask her to support him. Su Qingsang's lips moved. At this moment, she didn't even care that she was in his arms. What do you study? How about I help you find a job? You still say that you don't dislike me? You obviously don't like me. Hu Jinyao looked sad. Su Qingsang couldn't find her voice for a long time. This guy really knew how to confuse black and white. Chapter 19. What did he mean by all aspects? Su Qingsang understood the meaning of his words and looked at where he was looking. She pushed him away. Enough. The more she said, the more outrageous she became. She took a step back and cleared her throat. I still have something to do. If you don't have anything to do, clean up the place. Her salary wasn't low, plus her previous savings. It wasn't a big deal to have one more man to eat. She glanced at Hu Jinyao's face. Was she raising a gigolo? She rubbed her eyebrows and suddenly had a headache. It wasn't exactly inviting a wolf into the house. But she was the one who chose him and she was the one who said she wanted to get married. Now that things were like this, she didn't know what else she could do. Everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. It was understandable that he couldn't find a job. However, she couldn't stand it. A man was so unambitious, yet he could say that he needed a woman to support him. How thick-skinned did he have to be to say it so naturally? She rubbed her eyebrows. If Su Peijian knew that she had chosen such a person to marry, it would be really exciting. She looked Hu Jinyao up and down again. When she saw his sloppy appearance, she sighed in her heart. Forget it. Let's leave it at that. Anyway, she really had to ask this person to cooperate with her for the next few days. As for the future, if they really couldn't meet or if there was a difference in principle, at that time she would think of a way to get a divorce. Su Peijian probably wouldn't keep an eye on you anymore as long as she returned to her family after 3 dynasties. At that time she would naturally have a way to get rid of this man. Are you worried now? Hu Jinyao seemed to know what she was worried about. Don't worry, I was just joking. Before I left, I helped my boss solve a big problem. Even if I don't work for the time being, I won't starve to death. As he spoke, he didn't forget to carefully look at her expression, as if he was worried that she would regret it now. If you don't believe me, I can go find a job tomorrow. Su Qing-sang waved her hand tiredly. Forget it. There's no hurry. She glanced at Hu Jinyao again. I have something to do. Don't disturb me. As she spoke, she entered her study. Although it was called a study, it was actually not that big. There were 3 rooms, 1 master bedroom, 1 guest room, and the last room adjacent to the master bedroom was divided into 2 by Su Qing-sang. One was a cloakroom and the other was a study. Su Qing-sang sat down behind the desk, opened her notebook, and prepared to finish the unfinished paper from last time and hand it in. This was the bad thing about being a doctor. You couldn't lack research papers or you wouldn't be able to get promoted. Su Qing-sang was so focused that she didn't notice the passage of time. It wasn't until she heard a knock on the door that she realized it was already noon. The door of the study was knocked twice before it opened. Before she could get up, she saw Hu Jinyao standing outside. Time to eat. Those 3 simple words gave Su Qing-sang a very strange feeling. She had always been the only one in the house. Occasionally, Shi Mingwan would come here to stay for a day or 2. But that little girl had been very busy since she opened her own studio. Most of the time she would come to stay one night and leave the next day. For the first time she realized that there was now another person in the house. And she was already married. Chapter 20. Hu Jinyao called her Qing-sang very smoothly. Su Qing-sang glanced at him. He looked calm and unperturbed. She wanted to tell him not to call her that, but she swallowed her words. It was just a name, he could call it whatever he wanted. In any case, this marriage would not last long. He saved the document and stood up. She walked out of the room and saw 4 dishes and a soup on the dining table. She froze and turned to look at him. You can cook. It doesn't look like it. Hu Jinyao looked a little uncomfortable. I ordered takeout. Su Qing-sang walked closer and looked at the dish. It really was a takeaway. After all, she rarely cooked, so there weren't many ingredients in the fridge. If you want to eat, I might cook for you next time. Hu Jinyao smiled ingratiatingly as he spoke. Su Qing-sang sat down on the chair and glanced at him. Are you sure? Of course. It's just cooking. What's so difficult about it? Today's the first day. I'm not familiar with where you put those things. It meant that he would do it next time. Su Qing-sang nodded. She really thought that he would, so she didn't say much. She didn't know how to cook. No matter how badly the Su family treated her, it was impossible for them to treat her harshly. It was impossible for her to be a servant. After that, she devoted herself to her studies. In order to get rid of her family as soon as possible, she almost always lived on campus and ate in the cafeteria. At best, she could only cook some noodles. She really didn't know how to cook. Although it's takeaway, the taste shouldn't be bad. But if you don't like it, you can call me again. After all, I don't know what you like to eat. Hu Jinyao's expectant look made Su Qing-sang very uncomfortable. It's okay. I'm not picky. She was just an illegitimate daughter of the Su family. What right did she have to be picky? Therefore, Hu Jinyao didn't have to do that. Hu Jinyao sat down next to her and scooped a bowl of soup for her. His expression was a little too solicitous. Su Qing-sang was not used to it. Hu Jinyao acted as if he didn't see her uneasiness. Let me know if there's anything you like. We'll eat it tonight. I told you I'm not a picky eater. She was very busy and really did not have time to worry about such a trivial matter like eating. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He looked at the cold look on her face and seemed a little confused. He tilted his head and looked at her with a probing expression. Are you unhappy? No. She was the one who wanted to get married. She had no reason to disrespect Hu Jinyao. But she really wasn't used to having another person by her side. Even Wei Lenin, who was about to get married, didn't behave like him. But you obviously don't look happy. Su Qing-sang had a headache over Hu Jinyao's tactless behavior. I'm not unhappy. Seeing that Hu Jinyao seemed to be frightened by her, she softened her voice and said, You are a man. You really don't have to do this. For as long as she could remember, she had lived in the Su family. It was not hard to imagine that Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were not on good terms. It wasn't just the Su family. She had seen some couples who were in contact with the Su family. They looked harmonious on the surface, but their relationship was not that good. This was also why she agreed to marry Wei Lenin. She had no expectations for love, nor for men. It was just living with a man. It was the same for everyone. Look, it's either Wei Lenin or Hu Jinyao today. Does it matter who I'm with? She even felt that it was normal for people like Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue to be cold and distant. You don't have to do this. Thinking of this, she added, Hu Jinyao, we both know that we are only husband and wife on the surface. You don't have to do these things. Chapter 21. At this time, Su Qingsang felt that some things could be made clear. Hu Jinyao. I made that request to you in a moment of desperation the day before yesterday. You helped me out and I thank you. But we're still not suitable. If you think that you want to find a woman who can spend the rest of her life with you and wholeheartedly take care of your husband and children, then I'm not suitable. You don't have to do these things because I don't need them. I think maybe after this period of time we can get a divorce. After all, we both know that yesterday was just a stopgap measure, and the two of us are just... Before she could say the words fake husband and wife, Hu Jinyao's hand pressed on her hand at this time. His palm was slender. The joints were distinct but warm and scorching. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment and instinctively looked up at him. I won't get a divorce. The 5 sonorous words shocked Su Qingsang, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. You're my wife and we're already married. So we won't get a divorce. Su Qingsang couldn't say the rest of the words and didn't know what to say. The Hu Jinyao in front of her seemed to have changed into a different person. Such serious eyes, such focus, and that gaze scared Su Qingsang a little. She instinctively wanted to pull her hand back, but Hu Jinyao let go of her hand first. Besides, I don't have a job now and I still rely on you to support me. Hu Jinyao's serious expression only lasted for 3 seconds, and at this time, his expression became frivolous again. You also said that I helped you a lot. Don't think about leaving me. This person really? Su Qingsang didn't know what to say at this time. She actually felt a little nervous when Hu Jinyao looked at her so seriously just now. But who would have thought that this guy was actually pretending? She wasn't very disappointed, nor was she unhappy. Su Qingsang calmed down now. It was good that it wasn't like this. There was no example of a happy marriage around her. Those love stories that only existed in books were far away from her. If Hu Jinyao just wanted her to support him, it wouldn't be difficult. This kind of relationship was the best and safest. If he was serious, then she would really be worried. Su Qingsang, who was relaxed, was in the mood to taste the food on the table. Su Qingsang had lived in the Su family since she was a child. He had also developed the habit of not speaking while eating. However, Hu Jinyao did not have such scruples. He picked up food for her and scooped soup for her. Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable. She was a doctor and had an obsession with cleanliness. She really couldn't stand the situation where they ate each other's saliva. I'll get it myself. You eat it yourself. You are my wife. Of course I have to serve you. Hu Jinyao was still smiling carelessly. Su Qingsang frowned slightly. He wanted to say that he felt that it was dirty, but he couldn't say it. I'm going to eat. You eat by yourself. Putting down the bowl, Su Qingsang planned to finish her thesis. Hu Jinyao reached out his hand to her. What? And the key card. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang with a matter-of-fact expression. I still have my luggage in the hotel. I plan to bring it over later. Shouldn't you give me the key and card? Su Qingsang's lips moved as if she had just realized something at that moment. It is easier to invite a god and then to send him away. It wouldn't be so easy for her to get rid of Hu Jinyao now, because he was determined to pester her. Chapter 22. No matter how reluctant she was, when she saw Hu Jinyao put the luggage in front of her room, she knew that she couldn't change it. It was a foregone conclusion that Hu Jinyao would move in. There's a guest room over there. You can leave your luggage there. She took 2 steps forward to stop Hu Jinyao from opening the door. She knew that it was useless, but she really didn't want Hu Jinyao to enter her private territory. This was not a hotel room, nor was this the living room outside. This was her room, the room that she had always slept in alone. We are husband and wife, how can we sleep in separate rooms? Hu Jinyao didn't seem to notice the reluctance on Su Qingsang's face. He even put his arm around her shoulder. He brought his face close to hers. Don't worry. I don't snore when I sleep. Who cares if he snores or not? Su Qingsang's face turned green. This guy could really divert people's attention. Hu Jinyao. Before she could finish, Hu Jinyao had already pushed open the door of her room. Don't worry, my sleeping posture is also very good. You should have felt it yesterday. Yesterday? The scene of her snuggling into his chest and sleeping flashed across Su Qingsang's mind. An uncomfortable expression appeared on his face. In just a short while, Hu Jinyao had already carried his luggage in. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang quickly followed behind him. Not bad. Hu Jinyao hadn't been here before, so he glanced around. Well, the room wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy. The dark pink patterned wall cloth had a hint of feminine warmth, and the bed sheets on the bed were pink. The room had a large bay window with a thick cushion. The wind blew through the curtains that were the same color as the wallpaper. He could smell the faint fragrance in the air. It was the same smell he had smelled when he had hugged her to sleep last night. The expression on Hu Jinyao's face softened a little. Su Qingsang stood behind him and didn't see it. She only saw Hu Jinyao carrying his luggage. After looking around, he boldly walked towards the cloakroom. She raised her foot to stop him, but Hu Jinyao's long limbs allowed him to enter the cloakroom in 2 strides. Once again, Su Qingsang felt very uncomfortable. Her cloakroom was not messy. After all, she did not have many clothes. After all, she spent most of her time in the hospital. Clothes should be simple and comfortable. She had also tidied up well. Her clothes were all arranged neatly. After all, she was a doctor who loved cleanliness and tidiness. However, he came back late the day before yesterday and was tired. She left home in a hurry yesterday morning. He casually rummaged through a few undergarments. At that time, her original intention was to find a strapless bra to wear in the wedding dress. Later, she remembered that the wedding dress had a lining, so she didn't need it, so she put it back. Then, because he was in a hurry to leave, he found a few of them. As a result, there were still a few bras left on the clothes rack in a very conspicuous position, piled up casually just like that. She reached out to put away the bras, but Hu Jinyao was faster than her. His well-defined hand easily picked up one of them. The thin black fabric was held in the palm of the man's strong hand. Su Qingsang blushed all the way to her neck. "Give it to me." She reached out to grab it, but Hu Jinyao flipped his hand over and glanced at one of the numbers. Under his raised eyebrows, there was a hint of mischief in his deep eyes. Hu Jinyao's gaze fell on her body. He knew that she had a good figure when he saw her in the wedding dress yesterday. She was slim and graceful, but 34C. Chapter 23. Give it back to me. Su Qingsang flew into a rage out of humiliation. She almost jumped up and snatched the bra from Hu Jinyao. However, Hu Jinyao was one step faster than her. He raised his hand and easily lifted it. His body was really tall and sturdy. Su Qingsang could still remember the six-pack she saw this morning. Looking at the man holding her black bra with a calm expression, her face became redder and redder. Give it back to me. Just when she was really determined to jump around and grab it, Hu Jinyao finally, kindly, let her go and put the small piece of cloth in her hand. Su Qingsang breathed a sigh of relief. Without thinking, she wrapped the small piece of cloth tightly in her hand and thought about how to put it back. Unexpectedly, Hu Jinyao turned his hand and picked up the remaining few. Su Qingsang saved the one in her hand and didn't grab the others. She didn't expect Hu Jinyao to be so shameless. Hu Jinyao. Was he a pervert? Sorry. As Hu Jinyao spoke, he put the thin cloth in his hand back. He grinned, showing his white teeth. I haven't seen it before, so I'm a little curious. She hadn't seen it before? Who would believe that? Su Qingsang didn't believe Hu Jinyao at all. He randomly pulled the few pars over and put them away in a special place for these things. She glanced around again. When there was nothing else that could attract the attention of this god of plague, she breathed a sigh of relief. She tidied up a corner of the cloakroom and said, "Put your clothes here." Seeing that he didn't move, Su Qingsang couldn't stay any longer. She always felt that this place was too narrow. It felt very strange to just stay with the two of them. I still have something to do. You can clean up by yourself. As she spoke, she suddenly stopped and looked at him. Don't touch my things. Su Qingsang's face was still a little red when she returned to the study. She was surprised by the uneasiness. As a doctor, what hadn't she seen? The body of a man, the body of a woman, the structure of the human body. Why did she feel uncomfortable? Why did she feel guilty? She didn't need to, okay? Patting her cheeks, Su Qingsang decided to finish the paper she had been working on. But before she could type 2 lines, she was interrupted again. Looking at Hu Jinyao's head poking through the door, she suddenly felt a headache coming on. What's up? Her mind was still thinking about the scene of him pinching her little asterisk, and her expression couldn't be considered very good. What do you want to eat tonight? Whatever. How can you be so casual? As they spoke, Hu Jinyao came in. Today is our first day of marriage, right? Of course we have to celebrate, don't you think? Su Qingsang narrowed her eyes and glanced at his face. You don't want to cook, do you? A trace of uneasiness flashed across Hu Jinyao's face, but only for a moment. Of course not. I just wanted to celebrate with you. Su Qingsang glanced at the time. It was still early, not even 4 o'clock. Maybe later. I still have something to do. We can't be late. Hua Jinyao took a few steps forward and pulled her up. We have to go somewhere else before dinner? Where to? Su Qingsang didn't want to move. Her paper was very important. Director Zhang Qiubai, her supervisor at the hospital where she was staying, was very good to her and had always given her many opportunities to practice. She still wanted to continue her studies until she got a doctorate. You'll know when we get there. As he spoke, Hua Jinyao forcefully pulled her up. Chapter 24. Su Qingsang never thought that Hua Jinyao would bring her to the Civil Affairs Bureau. She sat in her car and watched as Hua Jinyao took out her ID card and residence booklet from somewhere. His lips opened and closed and opened again. You, my dear wife, we had the wedding yesterday but we haven't got the certificate yet. Therefore, since you're free today, let's get our certificate. Su Qingsang was unwilling. If they only held a wedding and not a marriage certificate, it would be very easy for her to get a divorce later. This was also the reason why she wasn't flustered before. However, there was no legal efficiency in holding a wedding. However, once they got married, Hua Jinyao would be her legal husband. If she wasn't satisfied, it would be much more difficult to get rid of this man. Let's go. Hua Jinyao had already gotten out of the car. Not only that, but he had also pulled her out of the car. Just like that, Su Qingsang was pulled into the Civil Affairs Bureau by Hua Jinyao. It wasn't time to get off work yet, and it wasn't a special day, so there weren't many people inside. Su Qingsang was still hesitating. She didn't expect Hua Jinyao to do this. His footsteps subconsciously headed outside. However, her wrist was held tightly by Hua Jinyao. He pulled her inside, and the expression on his face seemed to be one of excitement. Honey, you're going in the wrong direction. The place to get the certificate is this way. Hua Jinyao. She didn't want to get married to him. He really didn't want to. Look, there aren't many people today. Looks like it's a good day. Su Qingsang glanced at the hall. There were indeed not many people. Most people like to pick a good day to get married. Then he would come in the morning. It was already afternoon and they were about to get off work. A couple in front of them had just finished, and now it was their turn. Hua Jinyao handed over all the certificates. His attentive attitude surprised Su Qingsang even more than yesterday's wedding. She had a feeling that Hua Jinyao was very enthusiastic about this marriage. But why? It must be her imagination. Congratulations. The staff's attitude was very good. He took the certificates and guided them to fill out the form. Then he took them to take photos. Su Qingsang's body was stiff during the photo shoot. The light in front of her made her uncomfortable. She tried to stand up several times, but Hua Jinyao pressed her down on the chair. Honey, don't be nervous. I'm not nervous. Who's nervous? She was just hesitating. Hua Jinyao. Don't worry, you're very beautiful. Very photogenic. I'm sure it'll look good in the film. Hua Jinyao smiled at her as he spoke, revealing his white teeth. That overly bright smile made Su Qingsang dazed for a moment. When she came back to her senses, the photo had already been taken. 2 fresh out of the oven red marriage certificates were stamped with official seals. Su Qingsang looked at the 2 of them leaning against each other. For a moment she didn't know what to feel. She subconsciously looked at Hua Jinyao again. Honey, from today onwards please guide me. Hua Jinyao waved the red marriage certificate, and the smile on his face hurt Su Qingsang's eyes. She turned her face away from him and held the marriage certificate in her hand. Somehow she felt that something was wrong. Hua Jinyao. Why did he marry her? Whether it was yesterday's wedding or today's marriage certificate. If yesterday was to cooperate with her acting, then what about today? He had already seen Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue yesterday. He should know that she was just an illegitimate daughter of the Su family. Chapter 25. Hua Jinyao didn't seem to notice the confusion and curiosity in her eyes at all. He took her hand and got into the car again. Let's go. Let's go eat. Su Qingsang still held the marriage certificate in her hand. She looked at the document and didn't know where to put it. Hua Jinyao reached out and took the marriage certificate from her hand. I'll keep it for you. Hua Jinyao. Why did he want to marry her? After half an hour, he brought her to a nearby restaurant that looked very high-end. Su Qingsang had been here a few times, so she knew that the cost of living here was not low. He couldn't help but take another look at Hua Jinyao. After entering the restaurant, he picked a seat in the corner by the window and sat down. After ordering, Su Qingsang found that Hua Jinyao had been staring at her. She felt a little uncomfortable being stared at. What are you looking at? I'm looking at my wife, Hua Jinyao said carelessly. My wife is so beautiful. Why can't I look at her? This person was really... As expected, there wasn't a single moment when he was serious. Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao. She had always been rational, and it wasn't like she hadn't been praised before. His words only made her more certain that he had ulterior motives. What does he want from me? There was no answer to this question. Su Qingsang stood up and said, I'm going to the bathroom. Hu Jinyao looked at the figure that also left in a hurry. Was it his imagination? Why didn't his compliments make Su Qingsang happy? He glanced at the display window. It was late at night and the lights in the restaurant were already on. He could see his own reflection. Wasn't he handsome? That woman had bad taste. Hu Jinyao was sure of it. Su Qingsang stayed in the bathroom for a while, but she didn't feel shy. At first, when Hu Jinyao moved into her house, she was a little flustered. But now she began to develop a deep defense against this man. What was his goal? Before she figured it out, she could only reserve her opinion of Hu Jinyao. As for his goal, don't worry, they will find out sooner or later. Su Qingsang was so sure. Hu Jinyao found that Su Qingsang's attitude was much colder when she came back. This puzzled him. However, he thought that maybe Su Qingsang was not used to being praised. Was fine. If he praised her more in the future, she might get used to it. He was half full from the meal. Su Qingsang's phone rang. She glanced at Hu Jinyao, who gave her a look that said, do whatever you want. Su Qingsang picked up the phone. It was Su Qinghui. He reminded himself that tomorrow would be the third day of his marriage. He asked her to remember to bring Hu Jinyao home. Su Qingsang was surprised by the call. She thought that neither Li Qianxue nor Su Peijian wanted to see her, even if it was etiquette to return home. Based on Su Peijian's personality, wouldn't she want him to stay as far away from her as possible? What's wrong? What's the matter? Su Qingsang looked at his face. This person was very handsome, there was no doubt about it. But now being handsome was useless. Hu Jinyao, you have to go to my house with me tomorrow, you know that, right? I know. Hu Jinyao nodded and looked as if he understood everything. I understand. Did he really understand? Su Qingsang was actually very doubtful. She felt that he didn't understand at all. My family, I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with. If he didn't want to go back, she could find an excuse to say that she went on her honeymoon. At least not seeing each other would avoid a possible conflict. Small theater, Qingsang, what do you do? Wahua, security. Qingsang, how is that possible? Wahua, I'm telling the truth. After a long time, Qingsang, you liar. Wahua, what? Security. Protect the safety of all my companies. Ahem, for short, security. Chapter 26. Don't worry. Isn't it just accompanying you back to see your family? Hu Jinyao reached out to hold her hand. Don't worry, we're married now. Your parents are naturally my parents. Your family is naturally my family. I will get along well with them. Su Qingsang didn't believe a single word he said. She hadn't forgotten that Hu Jinyao had poured red wine all over Su Peijian's body. If it weren't for the inappropriate occasion yesterday, Su Peijian wouldn't have let it go so easily. When he returned home tomorrow, he was afraid that it would not be so easy to get over it. She even had reason to suspect that it was Su Peijian's idea for Su Qinghui to call her home. It was very likely. Looking at Hu Jinyao's fearless face, Su Qingsang felt a little helpless. Promise me don't cause any trouble tomorrow. Don't worry, I won't. Hu Jinyao smiled brightly. Causing trouble? Of course not. But if something came to provoke him, then he could not guarantee it. Su Qingsang didn't sleep well that night. She dreamed of her childhood again. She lived in the Su family. In fact, she had never understood. If Li Qianxue really didn't like her, why did she let her live in the Su family? Wouldn't it be better to send her to an orphanage or raise her outside? With the Su family's power, it was not impossible. However, she had raised an illegitimate daughter like her under her own name and had even given her the surname Su. In terms of life, she naturally didn't want to compare herself with Su Peijian. His room was also in the corner, and he was not allowed to eat at the same time as Li Qianxue. She had someone to take care of her daily life, but she was like a ghost in the Su family. She only learned about these things after she grew up. But when she was young, she didn't understand these things. When she was 5, she took a fancy to Su Peijian's doll. Su Peijian had many dolls like that. She had none. The person she liked was Su Peijian's favorite person in recent times. It was a pink little princess who looked especially cute. At that time, Su Peijian had nothing to do and would play with it in her arms. Su Qingsang wanted it, but she never dared to show it. Su Peijian had a lot of toys. No matter how much she liked the dolls, they were just temporary novelties to her. Soon the little princess doll was despised. He told the housekeeper, Nanny Zhang, to throw it away. At that time someone came to look for Nanny Zhang. She got busy and casually threw the doll on the sofa in the living room. Su Qingsang happened to pass by and saw it. There was no one around and the broken doll was thrown in a corner. She was only 5 years old, but her heart was moved. She picked up the doll and carried it back to her room. She was very happy, but Su Peijian didn't want it. It was also her first. She noticed that the doll's clothes were torn. That was why Su Pei wanted to throw it away. She didn't mind and carefully sewed up the wound herself. Even injured a few of his fingers. That night she was very happy. She hugged the doll and slept. She thought that Su Peijian didn't want it, so she didn't think about hiding it. For a whole month she played with the doll every day, hugged the doll and slept together. Until one day Su Peijian discovered it. She said the doll was hers. Su Qingsang argued, saying that she picked it up because Su Peijian didn't want it anymore. Su Peijian insisted. Even if I don't want something that I don't want, I won't give it to you. But you don't want it anymore. What's wrong with giving it to me? Chapter 27. At that time she was still young and didn't really understand what an illegitimate daughter was. Su Qingsang, aren't you going to return it? No, I picked it up. It's mine. Su Peijian had her stubbornness and she also had her own. She had always been alone, and this doll accompanied her so that she wouldn't be alone. She didn't want to return it to her. Just you wait. Su Peijian left at that time and didn't ask her for it again. She thought that this matter would be over. However, that day when she came back from kindergarten, the first doll in her life, which had accompanied her for a month, was cut into pieces. The clothes on its body were all in pieces. Its limbs were removed and the doll's head was twisted off. What was even more terrifying was that it was covered with red paint, looking like the doll's blood. The blood dyed her bed sheets red. Su Qingsang, who was only 5 years old, was frightened. Ha! Su Qingsang sat up and looked at the dark room in front of her, gasping for breath. She patted her chest and wanted to get out of bed to pour herself a glass of water. The bedside lamp was turned on first. Are you okay? The sudden voice startled Su Qingsang. She quickly stepped back, and this movement almost made her fall under the bed. Fortunately, there was a hand on her waist that held her faster and didn't let her fall. What's wrong? Hua Jinyao's enlarged face brought her back to reality. Looking at her familiar room, it seemed that it was only at this moment that she once again realized that she was married. Yes, she was married. The groom was this man who seemed to have nothing good except for his handsome appearance. Shaking her head, she pushed his hand away. Are you okay? Hua Jinyao asked again. Su Qingsang couldn't say it. She shook her head and wanted to get out of bed. Hua Jinyao was one step faster than her. He got out of bed and poured her a glass of warm water, then put it in her hand. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Su Qingsang glanced at him. She took the water from his hand and didn't say anything. As the warm water entered her throat, she felt better than before. In fact, she hadn't dreamed of that doll for a long time. In fact, she had benefited from the doll incident. After that, Su Qinghui seemed to have finally shown kindness. Every time he bought toys for Su Peijian, he would buy one for her as well. Although the toys given to her were nothing compared to those given to Su Peijian. But she also began to have her own toys. It was just that those toys that truly belonged to her didn't end up well. Su Qingsang's face turned green again as she recalled certain scenes from the past. She really wasn't a person who liked to reminisce. What did you dream about? Hua Jinyao asked again. Only then did Su Qingsang turn her attention to the man. Last night the two of them went to eat together. After this man came back, he began to act shamelessly again. When she finished her thesis and was about to go to bed, she realized that her bed had been taken by Hua Jinyao. She did try to get this man to sleep in the guest room outside, but Hua Jinyao wouldn't let her. We're married. We're husband and wife. Of course we have to sleep together. Su Qingsang couldn't control him at all. Fortunately, other than hugging her to sleep like he did yesterday, he didn't do anything more excessive. Otherwise she might not be able to help herself and hit him. Dreams are all opposite. Seeing that she didn't speak, Hua Jinyao took the empty glass from her hand and put it aside. He carefully looked at her face. The concern on his face didn't seem to be fake. Chapter 28. She seemed to be in a daze as if she was still troubled by the nightmare. Hua Jinyao looked at her dazed expression and reached out to hold her in his arms. Don't be afraid. Dreams are all opposite. There's nothing to be afraid of. His hand on her waist tightened slightly, and his comforting tone was stiff and jerky. Su Qingsang couldn't help but look at him again because of this realization. She didn't expect this man to know how to comfort people. As soon as she looked at him, he immediately became playful again. How is it? Did you suddenly realize that your husband is very handsome? Hua Jinyao saw that she was looking at him, and the corners of his lips curled up again. Under the light, his face was indeed very handsome. People said that the more you looked at a beauty under the light, the more beautiful she was. Of course, the premise was that his current expression didn't make people feel like they were asking for a beating. His proud expression made Su Qingsang's mouth twitch. She took back what she said just now. This man would probably never learn to be serious. His hand circled around her waist just like that. She really wasn't used to it, so she reached out to pull it away. Hua Jinyao was extremely stubborn and refused to let go. What? I'm not handsome? Su Qingsang rolled her eyes. Let go. I'm going to sleep. Let's sleep together. Who wanted to sleep with him? Su Qingsang wanted to say something, but Hua Jinyao had already laid down with her in his arms. Hua Jinyao. Who could sleep well with a hand on her waist? Take your hand away. No. Take it away. No. Are you taking it away or not? I'm not taking it away. Hua Jinyao tightened his grip as he spoke. Go to sleep. If you don't sleep, we'll do something else. What else? Realizing this, Su Qingsang quickly closed her eyes. She was still not used to being hugged to sleep like this. She unconsciously twisted her body, but Hua Jinyao's voice came from above her head again. Don't move. If she continued to twist like this, he really couldn't guarantee what would happen. Bastard. Su Qingsang didn't dare to move. She raised her eyes and glared at Hua Jinyao, only feeling that this man looked exceptionally annoying. Su Qingsang retracted her gaze and yawned. Having just experienced a nightmare, she thought that she would not be able to sleep. But in reality, she didn't have any more dreams to disturb her that night. She didn't have any dreams until dawn. When Su Qingsang woke up, the other side of the bed was empty again. Thinking that today was the day she returned to her family, Su Qingsang stood up. Back to the door. A feast at Hongmen. After washing up, Su Qingsang saw that Hua Jinyao had just walked in. He was carrying several bags of breakfast in his hands. You're up? Just in time for dinner. Hua Jinyao smiled at her, revealing his white teeth. Su Qingsang looked at the sportswear he was wearing. Did he go jogging? Hua Jinyao had already put down the breakfast. Aren't you going out? Su Qingsang was a doctor and often had irregular meals. She knew this was not good, but sometimes she would really forget. However, Hua Jinyao had only lived here for 2 days, and he was already staring at her while she ate. She couldn't tell how she felt, but at least she didn't hate it. Su Qingsang quietly ate breakfast and looked at Hua Jinyao in the morning light. She couldn't understand him anymore. She also didn't understand why this man married her. But now she had an inexplicable feeling. Maybe he didn't marry her for any purpose? He shouldn't have any purpose, right? Chapter 29. Su Qingsang's apartment was some distance away from the Su mansion. As the car drove steadily, she couldn't help but turn around and look at Hua Jinyao. The day before yesterday, Hua Jinyao was wearing a white suit and looked handsome. Yesterday he was wearing casual clothes and looked casual. Today Hua Jinyao was wearing a white shirt and black trousers. It was such a hot day, but he didn't feel hot. He had a good figure and was a standard clothes rack. Any clothes on him would make him look very handsome. Such a black and white outfit made him look taller and more handsome. Su Qingsang wasn't a person who cared about appearance, but she had to admit that Hua Jinyao was really good-looking. Almost impeccable. However, seeing him dressed like this, Su Qingsang couldn't help but wonder why Hua Jinyao married her. When she came back to her senses, the car had already stopped in front of the Su mansion. Su Qingsang looked at the familiar building and took a deep breath in her heart. She got out of the car first. You? She wanted to explain to Hua Jinyao. She didn't know what to explain. They had met at the wedding and she had a rough understanding of him. He didn't look like someone who would suffer losses. However, this was the Su mansion after all. She still hoped that he could have some scruples. Wait a minute. Hua Jinyao acted as if he didn't see the worry on her face. He went around to the back of the car and opened the trunk. Su Qingsang took a look inside the carriage and was surprised by the pile of things inside. This is gifts. Hua Jinyao took out the things one by one and put them in front of her. Didn't you say? I went back to my family today. I don't know what your parents like, so I bought some things casually. Did he buy them casually? Su Qingsang looked at the logos and outer packaging. These didn't look like they were bought casually, did they? You spent a lot of money. There was no need. Her position in the Su family was awkward. No matter how much she bought or how well she did, the Su family wouldn't appreciate it. It's not expensive. As Hu Jinyao spoke, he picked up all the bags and put his face close to her. Didn't I say that I lost my job? I used all my savings to buy these. You have to support me in the future. The corner of Su Qingsang's mouth twitched. Was this person trying to impress her? It's my first time visiting, so it's only right for me to please my mother-in-law and father-in-law. Don't you agree? Hu Jinyao's words made Su Qingsang speechless. She wanted to reach out to take the bag from his hand and help him carry it, but he didn't need her help. The concierge heard the commotion and came to open the door. Soon Nanny Zhang also came out. Second Miss, you're back? Okay. Su Qingsang nodded and walked inside. Nanny Zhang gently held his hand. Second Mississippi? There are other guests at home. Su Qingsang glanced at Nanny Zhang. When their eyes met, she smiled gratefully and said, I understand. Thank you, Nanny Zhang. Counter soldiers with arms and water with earth. Su Qingsang had a rough idea that the Su family probably had some kind of backup plan. What's up? Hu Jinyao noticed that Su Qingsang slowed down. He stopped and turned to look at her. It's okay. Su Qingsang walked up to him and said, We have guests. There was a deeper meaning in her eyes. Hu Jinyao almost immediately understood and nodded. The two of them entered the door together. When the two of them entered the door, the people in the living room all looked at the two of them. In those eyes, Su Qingsang saw a person who shouldn't be there. Chapter 30. Su Qingsang didn't expect that the Su family would make such a move. Was this Wei Lenin's idea? Or was it the Su family's idea? Interesting, very interesting indeed. She saw it and so did Hu Jinyao. He turned to look at her, but he did not see any other emotions in her eyes other than disdain. Dad. Honey, I'm back. Su Qingsang called Li Qianxue auntie. Li Qianxue hated her deeply. Not to mention asking her to call her mother, even asking her to call her auntie was like a fishbone stuck in her throat. Li Qianxue's expression was extremely cold, and Su Qinghui was not very enthusiastic either. Su Peijian and Su Yusin sat motionlessly. Su Peijian had a mocking look on her face as if she was watching a good show. Qiu Yanba sat next to her. Next to him was Wei Lenin. All eyes fell on Hu Jinyao. Compared to the different expressions on these people's faces, Hu Jinyao seemed much more generous. He walked forward with the gifts and stood in front of the coffee table. He looked at Su Qinghui. Dad. Auntie. He followed Su Qingsang's greeting and put the gift away. These are gifts for everyone. I didn't know what you guys liked, so I just bought some random stuff. He took out the items and placed them in front of Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue one by one. Even Su Peijian and Su Yusin had one. Su Qinghui glanced at the packaging on the table. He looked a little better than before. You're quite considerate. Of course. As Hu Jinyao spoke, he pulled Su Qingsang into his arms. Su Qingsang was not used to his intimate behavior. But in this situation she could only force herself to cooperate with him. Since I'm married to Qingsang, Qingsang's family is naturally my family. Hu Jinyao turned to look at Su Qingsang. His eyes were extremely gentle. Don't you think so? Yeah. The corners of Su Qingsang's mouth twitched, and her smile was a little stiff. Family? These people did not treat her as a family member. But at this time she would definitely not say such words. Take a seat. His attack was indeed not light. Su Qinghui didn't care about the formalities. However, this son-in-law had such intentions and was able to give such a valuable gift. He could tell that it was not bad. Su Peijian snorted. These things can't be fakes, right? Not to mention anything else, just the bracelet from the Emerald Pavilion that he gave Li Qianxue. Who didn't know that the things in the Emerald Pavilion were not cheap? A bracelet could easily cost hundreds of thousands of yuan. How could an employee of such a small company afford it? Miss Su's words are interesting. He looked at Qiu Yanba and said, Jade Pavilion seems to be under Mr. Qiu's name. Whether it's true or not, President Qiu has the right to say, right? Brother-in-law, you're too kind. Qiu Yanba's voice was indifferent. Since we're family, you can just call me by my name. Su Qinghui glanced at his daughter, then looked at Su Qingsang. Sit down. Don't just stand there. Both of them sat down. It seemed that Su Qinghui had accepted Hu Jinyao. Wei Lenin's face darkened. He didn't want to see this result. Qingsang. Wei Lenin wanted to walk in front of Su Qingsang, but before she could react, he sat down on the sofa next to her and held her hand. Qingsang. I already know. Know what? Su Qingsang was a little confused. For a moment she forgot to pull her hand out. At that moment, Wei Lenin glanced at Hu Jinyao with some pride, then looked at Su Qingsang affectionately. Chapter 31. Su Qingsang looked at Wei Lenin. For a moment she wondered if this man was sick in the head. Wei Lenin. His appearance in front of her on a day like this already made her very unhappy. Let go. I won't. Wei Lenin shook his head. His gaze became more and more persistent. I know you did it to anger me. I also admit that it was my fault before. But I angered you once and you angered me once. Let's call it even, okay? Call it even? Su Qingsang was so angry that she almost laughed. This was the first time she knew that the word, even, could be used in this way. Before she could pull her hand out, Wei Lenin tightened his grip. I already told your father. He knows. Qingsang, since the past is in the past, let's forget about it. I don't care and you don't care either. Let's start over, okay? No. Su Qingsang pulled her hand out forcefully and looked at Wei Lenin as if he was crazy. Why don't I care? Don't you know what you've done? Who wants to start over with you? Everyone in the Su family looked at the scene in front of them. No one spoke. Qiu Yanba sat beside Su Peijian. He looked at Su Peijian and then at Su Qingsang. He didn't say a word. No one could tell what he was thinking from his slightly pursed lips. His fingers tapped on his knees. Hu Jinyao was standing behind Su Qingsang. His expression had changed from one of nonchalance to one of seriousness. He didn't care about what Wei Lenin said. He was thinking about the word fake marriage. Fake marriage? Who said it was fake marriage? He looked at Su Peijian. He found that the look in her eyes was getting more and more obvious. Hu Jinyao's expression immediately darkened. Seeing Hu Jinyao's expression change, Wei Lenin felt that what he said was true. Now he just needed Su Qingsang's forgiveness. Qingsang, I said that everything before was my fault. Don't be too stubborn. Stubborn? Who was stubborn? Su Qingsang was so angry that she almost laughed. Li Rongrong has your child in her stomach? What happened to that child? Wei Lenin's expression changed instantly. His aura dropped a little. But only for a little. Soon enough he regained his composure. Qingsang, I've already asked her to abort the child. Qingsang, I've told you what happened in the past. Let's just let it go. Besides, didn't you fake your marriage with him to piss me off? So we're even, you see. Who said our marriage was fake? Hu Jinyao chuckled. His expression changed again. He reached out and pulled Su Qingsang's body into his arms. He looked at Wei Lenin with piercing eyes. Yesterday the two of us went to get our marriage certificate. So we're really married. The living room was silent for a moment. Everyone looked at Hu Jinyao, wondering if he was telling the truth. Su Qingsang was held in his arms. She was not used to the intimate contact between the two of them. But now she had to put on a show for this group of people. Even though she was not used to it, she could only snuggle into Hu Jinyao's arms. His chest was broad and muscular. Su Qingsang could almost feel his heartbeat through the thin layer of clothing. Noticing that her body was stiff, Hu Jinyao tightened his grip on her shoulder. Chapter 32. Wei Lenin didn't believe that Su Qingsang would be willing to marry Hu Jinyao. He had specially investigated. This Hu Jinyao didn't have any background. He had investigated and found out that he was just a poor boy with nothing. Even the Hua family didn't come on the wedding day. If it wasn't a fake marriage, then it was shameful. How could it develop into a real marriage at this time? Compared to his agitation, Hu Jinyao was much calmer. Looking at Wei Lenin's face full of doubt and exasperation, Hu Jinyao didn't care that the other Su family members were there. He tilted his head and planted a kiss on Su Qingsang's cheek. Looking at Wei Lenin, who was about to explode, he smiled. Nothing is impossible. Things like getting the marriage certificate can be found out easily. Besides, why would I lie to you? The other Su family members were all dumbfounded by the sudden display of affection. Su Peijian bit her lip and looked at Qiu Yanba subconsciously. He acted as if he didn't see her and only looked at Su Qingsang. Wei Lenin was very angry. His face, which had always been gentle, was now flushed with anger. He turned to face Su Qingsang and tried to control his anger. Qingsang, do you have to hurt me like this? I admit that what happened before was my fault, but I promise I won't do it again. Why can't you forgive me? Hua Jinyao wanted to say something, but Su Qingsang was amused by Wei Lenin's words. As expected, shameless people were invincible. Who hurt who? She didn't know that Wei Lenin was so shameless before. Wei Lenin, if you must think that I hurt you by marrying someone else, then so be it. Now please leave. I don't want to see you. Qingsang? Wei Lenin couldn't believe that she was asking him to leave. Hua Jinyao and I are already married. The wedding was held and we got our marriage certificate. Whether you admit it or not, this is an unchangeable fact. If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. As for you saying that I hurt you? Wei Lenin, today is a good day for me to return to my family. You just came here and said these things. Who hurt who? Wei Lenin's lips moved. He instinctively turned his head to look at the other members of the Su family, as if seeking help. However, no one in the Su family made a sound. Everyone was looking at Su Qingsang as if wondering why she had changed. Wei Lenin turned around to look at Su Qingsang again. He wanted to leave but was unwilling, but Su Qingsang had such an attitude when she stayed. She looked around, then turned to Hua Jinyao and reached out her hand to him. Hua Jinyao readily stood up and reached out to shake her hand. Su Qingsang took a deep breath. There were some things that she knew the result long ago. But when she saw the truth again, it still made her feel a little uncomfortable. However, she should have been used to such emotions a long time ago. It was impossible for Wei Lenin to appear today without the permission of the Su family. Su Peijian only had this idea, but Li Qinxue and Su Qinghui didn't stop her. No matter what, they were family members who had lived together for more than 20 years. It was fine if he was rude to her in private, but on a day like this, he humiliated her like this. Jinyao. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft. She usually didn't care about anything, but today she was tough for once. Let's go. Chapter 33. Su Qinghui was surprised by Su Qingsang's action. Qingsang? Since this family doesn't welcome us, we'll be leaving first. Su Qingsang found it strange that she could still remain calm at a time like this. If he was really injured too much, it wouldn't matter anymore, right? Su Qingsang. Su Peijian stood up abruptly as if she was about to explode. Li Qinxue glared at her and she had to sit back down. There was some interest in Qiu Yanba's eyes. He seemed to be pondering over the scene in front of him. Su Qingsang didn't look at anyone else but Hua Jinyao. If the purpose of his marriage was to get close to the Su family, then he would know now that it was useless. Hua Jinyao put an arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. Let's go. His relaxed attitude made Su Qingsang heave a sigh of relief. If Hua Jinyao really said that he wanted to stay, she would lose even more face. As soon as she thought of this, she felt grateful to Hua Jinyao. She was even less repulsed by his hand on her shoulder. Su Qinghui frowned. He glanced at Li Qinxue and then at Su Peijian. He was also aware of today's matter, but he did not object to it. However, fine, I'll leave. If you have the guts, don't ever come to this door again. Su Peijian's voice was filled with hatred, which made Li Qinxue glance at her. Peijian, what nonsense are you talking about? Li Qinxue was the beloved daughter of the president of the Li group. Naturally, she was doted on. She didn't care about the world, but because she loved Su Qinghui so much, she even accepted his illegitimate daughter. How could she not hate him? Naturally, he hated them. However, she came from a prestigious family after all. Even if she hated him, she wouldn't show it on her face. Su Peijian didn't say a word as her sharp gaze swept over her. Li Qinxue turned to look at Su Qinghui. Call them back. If people find out that I don't even eat at home, they might say that I'm very mean. Su Qinghui glanced at her and asked Nanny Zhang to keep her here. Qiu Yanba, who had been silent all this while, suddenly stood up. I've been sitting for too long. I'll go call them. Su Peijian's expression changed almost instantly. She was about to explode. Li Qinxue gave him another look. Her lips moved, but she didn't explode on the spot. At this time, Qiu Yanba had already stood up and walked outside. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao didn't feel relieved until they walked out of the main house and into the garden. In fact, she had never liked coming to the Su family, nor did she like to see the other members of the Su family. She didn't want to see Su Qinghui or anyone else. He looked at Hua Jinyao. Just now, when he followed her without hesitation, she felt a lot more comfortable. However, she was getting more and more confused. Why did this guy want to marry her? Feeling her gaze, Hua Jinyao turned around and found that she was staring at him. The hand on her shoulder slightly tightened. If you don't like coming here, don't come next time. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line. Then he nodded lightly. She turned around and looked behind her. This was once her home. However, she said, "Let's go. Go home." Yes, let's go home. Wherever she was, wasn't it home? However, when the two of them were one step away from the door, they heard footsteps behind them. The two of them looked back together and saw that Qiu Yanba had caught up with them. Chapter 34. Su Qingsang didn't like the Su family, so naturally she wouldn't like this future son-in-law of the Su family. The Su family and the Qiu family had been friends for generations. Ever since he was young, Qiu Yanba had always been a child in the eyes of the elders. He earned a master's degree in business administration from MIT early on. After returning home, he entered the family business and began to help the Qiu family deal with the family business. He would visit the Su family every year. Su Peijian was in the prime of her youth. Qiu Yanba was good-looking and had a good family background. In her opinion, in all of Lin City, only Qiu Yanba was worthy of her. Coincidentally, the Qiu family also wanted to form a marriage alliance with the Su family. Therefore, the day Qiu Yanbo returned to China to take over the company after completing his studies was also a good day for the two of them to get engaged. Su Qingsang had always known how much Su Peijian cared about Qiu Yanba. That was why she kept her distance from him. However, she did not know what had happened that night. However, in her opinion, after she fell to the ground, Qiu Yanba not only didn't help her explain, but also acquiesced to Su Peijian's accusation. That was intolerable. She was not that cheap. She liked every man she saw. She would never try to seduce a man who would become her brother-in-law, but no one believed her. Qiu Yanba's attitude that day, as if he was watching a show, also made her feel uncomfortable. Qiu Yanba acted as if he didn't see Su Qingsang's sullen face. He just turned around and looked at Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao, right? What's up? Hu Jinyao's hand never left her shoulder. Because of Qiu Yanba, he tightened his grip. Su Qingsang was still not used to being hugged by him, but she stood still. No matter what, today is a good day for you to return home. It doesn't seem appropriate to leave like this. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao looked at each other. Su Qingsang said before Hu Jinyao could, "There's nothing inappropriate about it. You don't want to see us anyway. If we don't want it, you can also have some peace." What kind of words were those? Qiu Yanba furrowed his brows slightly. The leisurely look in his eyes faded and was replaced with seriousness. "Qingsang, are you saying this to sever ties with the Su family?" Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and his gaze instantly became much sharper. Not only him, but Su Qingsang also felt very uncomfortable and uncomfortable. Her relationship with Qiu Yanba wasn't that bad, was it? Su Qingsang felt that it was too intimate for him to call her that. How could that be? He felt strange in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. She wanted to sever ties with the Su family, but this wasn't up to her. "I just know my place and I don't want to be an eyesore." Qiu Yanba narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Qingsang, who was completely different from his impression of her. "Qingsang's temper has grown since she got married. Even your words are a lot more aggressive than before." Su Qingsang didn't say anything, not because she was married. It was just that she was tired and she had come to terms with it. No matter what she did in the eyes of the Su family, it was not flattering and was wrong. Since that was the case, why did she have to force herself? Is it because you're married that you have confidence? Qiu Yanba glanced at Hu Jinyao as he spoke. This man was not as simple as he appeared to be. At least on the day of the wedding he went to investigate, but he didn't find any information related to Hu Jinyao. There were two situations like this. The first was that this man was really ordinary and there was nothing to investigate. The other was that this man was unfathomable, so powerful that no one could find out anything about him. Chapter 35. Is there anything else? Su Qingsang didn't want to waste any more time here, especially when this person was Qiu Yanba. If Su Peijian saw it, there would be more to say. Qiu Yanba chuckled. "Qingsang, you really don't have to be in such a hurry to leave. Especially on a day like today. We're all family. Stay for a meal before you leave." As he spoke, he glanced at Hu Jinyao from the corner of his eye. He was really curious now. What was this man's trump card? "No need." Su Qingsang refused. "I don't want you to be too full." "Why would you?" Qiu Yanba turned to look at Hu Jinyao. "Does Jinyao think so too?" No matter what, it was a good thing to have a relationship with the Su family, the Li family, and the Qiu family. He really couldn't think of anyone who would refuse. Hu Jinyao really did refuse. He turned to look at Su Qingsang intimately, his eyes as gentle as water. Whatever Qing Sang says I will do. Since she doesn't want to stay, then let's go. Hu Jinyao. Qiu Yanba couldn't help but frown. He looked at Hu Jinyao and thought of what he said the other day. I remember you said that you work for a company, right? I wonder which company it is? There was no company in Lin City that Qiu Yanba didn't know. If he had ever met this person, he would never forget. I left. Hu Jinyao didn't feel embarrassed at all. I left before I got married. Qiu Yanba didn't know what to say at this moment. He looked at Su Qingsang again. She seemed to know it already and didn't look surprised at all. Qiu Yanba looked down. He suddenly felt that something was strange, but he couldn't tell what was strange at the moment. When she looked at Hu Jinyao again, her eyes seemed to be sizing him up. So, Jinyao is unemployed now? Yes. There are some positions in our company that are vacant. I didn't know you. Thank you. No need. Hu Jinyao refused without thinking. I will find a job myself. I won't trouble you, Mr. Qiu. Qiu Yanba called him by his name, but Hu Jinyao called him Mr. Qiu. They were close and distant. Qiu Yanba could be considered a genius. Being humiliated like that, his expression turned ugly. Thinking of what Su Chenghui had said when he came out, the trace of unhappiness on his face was suppressed. It seems that Jinyao is quite ambitious. But no matter how ambitious he was, he didn't need to have a strained relationship with his family. After all, Qingsang was still a daughter of the Su family. What do you think? Was he using both the carrot and the stick? Su Qingsang's face darkened. What Qiu Yanba said made sense. As long as the Su family did not announce to the public that they had severed ties with her, she was still a daughter of the Su family. He glanced at Hu Jinyao. For some reason she just wanted to know what he was thinking. When Hu Jinyao saw Su Qingsang looking at him, he smiled at her. When he turned to face Qiu Yanba, the smile on his face disappeared. Boss Qiu. I just don't want to disturb your family reunion. So he didn't want to eat here. It can't be that she's not a daughter of the Su family just because she doesn't eat here, right? Qiu Yanba was stunned for a moment. Hu Jinyao continued, you also said that Qingsang is the daughter of the Su family. Since that was the case, it was understandable that she didn't feel well today and wanted to go back and rest. Isn't that right? Before Su Qingsang could react to Hu Jinyao's eloquence, he had already taken her outside. Qiu Yanba stood behind the two of them and watched them leave. His slightly narrowed eyes were tinged with a bit of inquisitiveness. Chapter 36. Su Qingsang didn't react until she got into the car. She sat in the front passenger seat and looked at Hu Jinyao. At the wedding, she already knew that this man's mouth was extremely sharp. She didn't expect him to have the upper hand in front of Qiu Yanba. This was really, he said that it was just a meal. She was still a daughter of the Su family whether she ate it or not. But the fact was that she was not a daughter of the Su family whether she ate it or not. After all, no family would treat their daughter like that. She looked down at her slightly pale fingertips. There were some very simple things that she couldn't see through. In fact, she still had expectations in her heart. Expectations would hurt. If she didn't have expectations, she wouldn't be disappointed and wouldn't be hurt. Su Qingsang was stunned when her hand was suddenly held by someone. She looked up at the owner of the hand. She didn't know when Hu Jinyao had stopped starting the car. At that moment he was holding her hand and looking at her attentively. If you don't like it, don't come next time. Su Qingsang was stunned and looked at Hu Jinyao's enlarged face in front of her. He was also looking at her. His eyes were focused as if he only had eyes for her. Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable being stared at like that, so she turned her face away. Why wouldn't I like it? This is my home. Although the people in this family didn't treat her as a family member. She said the last sentence softly, but Hu Jinyao heard it clearly. He gently squeezed her palm. Your home isn't here. Let's go home now. That 3-bedroom house was their home. Su Qingsang understood what he meant and looked at Hu Jinyao holding her hand. His hand was very beautiful, slender, well-proportioned, and well-defined. No, Hu Jinyao suddenly said, causing Su Qingsang to turn to look at him again. We should go eat first. The Su family villa was a little far from the city. It was almost noon after all that had happened just now. What do you want to eat? Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang with some encouragement in his eyes. Don't say anything. You always say anything. I feel like you're hard to take care of. Su Qingsang swallowed the word, anything she was going to say. Looking at Hu Jinyao's smiling face, the negative emotions just now disappeared without a trace. I want to eat crossbridge noodles. When he was in school there was a guy from Y province. She often brought him to look for the cross-the-bridge noodle shops in various places in Yang City. She was not particular about food, but she could never forget that feeling. All right. Hu Jinyao started the car as he spoke. Where is it? I know a restaurant in Y province. The rice noodles there are delicious. Su Qingsang took out her phone as she spoke. They have to make a reservation every time they go there. You drive first. I'll see if there's any space left. Okay. Hu Jinyao glanced at her out of the corner of his eye as he spoke. When he realized that the disappointment on her face was completely gone, the corners of his lips curled up a little. When Su Qingsang woke up in Hu Jinyao's arms again, she found that she had gotten used to it. It had only been a few days, but she had already gotten used to a man's embrace? Looking at Hu Jinyao's closed eyes, she had a strange feeling in her heart. She still didn't know who Hu Jinyao was. His identity, his background, and even their marriage, even his parents hadn't seen them. But Su Qingsang was willing to believe that he wouldn't hurt her. Chapter 37. Just like yesterday, if Hu Jinyao said he wanted to stay in the Su family, she would have no choice but to agree. But she would feel very uncomfortable afterwards. Hu Jinyao took her away just like that. Then he followed her heart and went to eat the bridge noodles. Su Qingsang didn't know how other men felt, but Hu Jinyao's actions moved her a little. Maybe he really didn't marry her because she was the daughter of the Su family? She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao's face again. She had to admit that even when he was asleep, this guy had the ability to charm people. His sculpted features looked innocent at the moment, and his eyes, which always had a smile on them, were tightly closed. His long eyelashes were like feathers. She didn't expect his eyelashes to be so long. She even had an urge to reach out and touch them. Do I look good? The sudden voice startled Su Qingsang. Only then did she realize that Hu Jinyao had woken up. She was caught peeping, so she looked very embarrassed. Does your husband look good? Hu Jinyao sat up and moved closer to Su Qingsang. He moved his face a little closer to him. Su Qingsang took a step back as if she had been scared out of her wits. Her reaction pleased Hu Jinyao, and he moved closer again. Su Qingsang couldn't avoid it, and the bed was already behind her. What? Hu Jinyao's hands were on both sides of her body, and the tip of his nose was almost touching hers. I get up. Su Qingsang wanted to get down in a hurry, but Hu Jinyao gently circled his arms when she wanted to escape and then turned over. Su Qingsang was pressed under his body and she was shocked. Hu Jinyao's facial features were very close and his eyes were deep. She saw her own shadow in them. She could still feel his breath and everything made her uncomfortable. You get up. Seeing that he didn't move, Su Qingsang added, You're so heavy. Heavy? Not only did Hu Jinyao not get up, but he deliberately pressed on her body. How heavy? This guy was really... Su Qingsang blushed and felt a little uncomfortable. I have to work today. It's still early. As Hu Jinyao spoke, his face moved down a little more. He was about to touch Su Qingsang. Without thinking, Su Qingsang raised her hand and pushed him. Hu Jinyao didn't expect her to push him, so he rolled over and fell asleep on the side. Su Qingsang quickly got off the bed and said, I'm going to wash up. She ran into the bathroom as if she was escaping. Her movements were so fast that it seemed like someone was chasing after her. Hu Jinyao turned his body sideways. He supported his chin with one hand and gently touched his face with the other. Was he less attractive? Su Qingsang didn't know that her rejection of Hu Jinyao had made him doubt her charm. But even if she knew, she wouldn't mind. After eating the breakfast Hu Jinyao bought, Su Qingsang picked up her bag and car keys and was about to leave. Hu Jinyao followed behind her. Su Qingsang watched him lock the door and looked at him with confusion. Are you going out? She asked. I'll send you to work. No need. It was so close that she could drive herself. You still want me to send you? It's fine. I'm fine anyway. Seeing that Su Qingsang didn't want to go out with him, Hu Jinyao frowned slightly and pretended to be hurt. You don't like me to send you? No, she really didn't like it. In the past few days, Hu Jinyao had invaded her life too much. She needed time to get used to it. Chapter 38. If not, then let's go. Hu Jinyao. Don't worry, I'll only deliver it today. I'll deliver it tomorrow. What do you think? As Hu Jinyao spoke, he reached out and put his arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. Su Qingsang was stunned. She was really not used to such intimacy. She would be late if she continued to waste time. She could only acquiesce to Hu Jinyao's actions. The car drove out of the neighborhood. Su Qing-sang watched Hu Jingyao skillfully driving the car from the corner of her eye. Thinking of what Qiu Yanba said yesterday, she was really curious. She was only curious for a moment. She would never ask Hu Jingyao what he did for a living. The hospital was not far from the apartment, so they arrived soon. Su Qing-sang picked up her bag and got out of the car. She found that Hu Jingyao got out of the car with her. Hu Jingyao went around to the back of the car and took out a cardboard box. Su Qing-sang looked at the logo on it and had a bad feeling. What are you going to do? What do you think? Hu Jingyao smiled, showing his white teeth. Su Qing-sang had a feeling that she wouldn't like what he was going to do next. She wanted to stop him, but how could she stop what Hu Jingyao wanted to do? Su Qing-sang watched him carry the big box of wedding candies into the department and into her office. Hello everyone. I'm Hu Jingyao, Qingsang's husband. This introduction was enough to give Su Qing-sang a headache. His lips opened and closed again. She watched as Hu Jingyao appeared in her department and in front of her roommates. It would be fine if he just went to give the wedding candies one by one and then introduced himself, but what was going on? Qing-sang, please take care of her. Thank you. Qing-sang. She's the worst at taking care of herself. She's already married, but she was still writing a paper at home yesterday. Su Qing-sang was dumbfounded. What was this person talking about? Hu Jingyao. I didn't say anything wrong. Hu Jingyao gave the candies to everyone in the department. Next, it was the next department. Qing-sang, let's go next door and finish giving out the rest. He bought a lot. Su Qing-sang had a headache. Under the gaze of a group of colleagues and her tutor, she took the box. Aren't you busy? Go and get busy. Let them take the rest. Qing-sang? It's okay. Everyone is busy. I'll come and get it when I'm free. Su Qing-sang felt a little awkward. She twitched the corner of her mouth, hoping that Hu Jingyao would leave as soon as possible. Hu Jingyao stood still. There seemed to be some grievance on his handsome face. Su Qing-sang had a headache, a real headache. Could this guy not put on such an expression as if she was the one bullying him? It made her feel inexplicably guilty. She didn't bully him. What was she feeling guilty about? He came here without her permission. Seriously, everyone in the department was watching. The hospital she worked in was one of the largest hospitals in Lin City. There were many people in one department. All right. Then I'll go back first. Hu Jingyao glanced at the others as he spoke. I'm sorry. Sorry to disturb your work. Qing-sang, I'm leaving. Su Qing-sang had just breathed a sigh of relief, but at this moment, the person leaned over and pecked her on the lips. I'll pick you up after work. Su Qing-sang's face instantly turned red as if it was on fire. This guy. However, before she could react, Hu Jingyao had already turned around and left. As soon as she turned around, she saw the teasing gazes of everyone in the department. She was momentarily embarrassed. Chapter 39. Su Qing-sang had been feeling a little uneasy this morning. Hu Jingyao's actions and the wedding candies. Yes, it attracted a lot of attention in front of her colleagues. Later, not only the department next door but even the departments downstairs and upstairs also came over. She even felt lucky that Hu Jingyao had bought enough wedding candies so there would still be leftovers. Su Qing-sang didn't get a chance to catch her breath until lunchtime. When she arrived at the hospital's cafeteria, the aunties in the cafeteria winked at Su Qing-sang. Dr. Su, why didn't you send me wedding candies? I've been giving you more food every day. Su Qing-sang blushed. The cafeteria lady put 2 more poached eggs in her bowl. Dr. Su, you just got married so you must be tired. Take care of yourself. Seeing the people in the cafeteria looking at her, Su Qing-sang felt really embarrassed. He tried his best to minimize his presence. When he was about to find a seat with the tray, he didn't notice that someone was standing in front of him. Just as she was about to touch him, the man was very powerful. He quickly supported her, stabilized her body and let her stand still. Be careful. Thank you. Su Qing-sang raised her head. When she saw the person in front of her, there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. Hongchen, why are you here? Why can't I be here? Zhua Hongchen had the face of a scholar, but he had a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes. Usually, this appearance attracted a lot of men. In order to avoid peach blossoms, he even wore a pair of glasses even though he was not nearsighted. Zhua Hongchen was the son of the hospital's director. He majored in cardiac surgery. He was 3 years older than Su Qing-sang. At such a young age, he was already a famous attending physician in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery. In the previous year, he had gone to the United States for academic research. Have you finished your research? Yes. Zhuo Hongqin nodded. Noticing that someone was looking in their direction, he spread his hands and said, "There are seats over here. Let's sit down and talk." All right. Su Qingsang admired Zhuo Hongqin. He was young but very experienced. Last year there was a pregnant woman with heart disease. At that time all the doctors did not dare to accept it, but he said that there was no problem. In the end, under the combined efforts of the thoracic surgery department and obstetrics department, the pregnant woman's delivery was ensured, and both mother and child were safe. The incident had even made the news in Lin City at the time. Su Qingsang admired capable people very much, especially someone like Zhuo Hongqin. Zhuo Hongqin was the dean's son, but he didn't put on any airs and usually ate with them. He brought some food over. Su Qingsang glanced at his bowl. What's wrong? Or do you like to eat vegetables? Yes. As a cardiothoracic surgeon, he operated on patients every day. Zhuo Hongqin was more interested in vegetarian food than meat. Everyone in the academy knew about this. Su Qingsang took a sip of the soup and noticed that Zhuo Hongqin was staring at her. She was puzzled. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? I heard you got married as soon as I came back? Su Qingsang curled her lips and said helplessly, Yeah, I'm married. There was a flash of sadness in Zhuo Hongqin's beautiful peach blossom eyes under the lenses. Why so sudden? I remember you said before that you wouldn't get married until you were 30. Plans can't keep up with changes. Su Qingsang smiled. She didn't want to talk about her flash marriage. Zhuo Hongqin nodded and suddenly sighed. Once you get married, the hearts of many bachelors in our hospital will be broken again. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.